Chapter 1167. Gigazi sighed faintly when great celestial Emperor Yuanzhen transformed into a purple mist and fled. He agreed too quickly. What a ghost. Wu Qi toyed with the wine cup for a while, then suddenly laughed and said, "Ghosts are everywhere in the celestial court now, so it would be strange if he didn't have a ghost in his heart. No matter what schemes they have, as long as I'm stronger than them, all schemes are for naught." With a long laugh, Wu Qi soared into the sky and shouted in the direction of the Palace of Translucence, "Your Majesty, since you are so generous, let the Ministry of Works and the Division of Craftsmen listen to my orders. I'm using them because I have serious business to do." Suddenly, a thunderbolt flashed in the direction of the Palace of Translucence, and a patch of approaching dark mist was struck into pieces by the thunderbolt. Then, Celestial Emperor Yuanzhen's voice rang out, "Very well. The principal gods of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, and the billions of divine weapons were all under Wu Qi's command, so what could the Ministry of Works and the Division of Craftsmen do?" In the Celestial Court, although the Ministry of Works and the Division of Craftsmen were important, they were not as important as the principal gods of 5 elements. Wu Qi laughed loudly, then casually threw the 5 tokens that Celestial Emperor Yuanzhen had thrown out in all directions. A 5-colored spirit light soared into the sky, and the 5 tokens hovered in midair, glowing brightly. Wu Qi shouted, "5 principal gods of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, listen to my order. Quickly lead all the divine weapons and divine generals under your command. Anyone who disobeys will be served on the God Execution Platform." The God Execution Platform was a platform condensed by the power of the heavenly Tao after the conferment of gods, and it was the only tool of heavenly punishment that could kill all gods. Hearing Wu Qi say the name of the God Execution Platform, deep voices of assent came from all directions, and before long, over 1,000 saints, leading tens of thousands of divine generals and countless divine weapons, rose into the sky from all directions, quickly forming into a great formation and converging toward the 3 pure heavens. The principal gods of metal, wood, water, fire, earth guarded the 33 heavens, and each heaven was garrisoned with 5 divine armies. Now, with just an order from Wu Qi, all 5 armies were mobilized, and the scene was truly frightening. For a time, the sky above the 3 pure heavens was covered by 5-colored clouds. The 5 righteous gods formed a great formation and occupied the 5 positions of the 5 elements. The deafening sound of the war drums made people dizzy. From time to time, the cheers of some immortal officials and immortal officials could be heard from various places in the 3 pure heavens. Seeing the 5 righteous gods of 5 elements in such an imposing manner, and seeing that it was Wu Qi who was giving the order to dispatch the 5 righteous gods of 5 elements, those anxious immortal officials rushed out of their mansions, calling their friends and rushing to exalted Shoujua's palace. Now, everyone could tell that the 6 sky kings and the other holy people of the celestial court could not deal with the breakworld people who had infiltrated the celestial court. The foreign demons were killing the fairies to increase their own power. Rather than being killed by the demons, it was better to rely on the support of Wu Qi, who had the support of Purple Extreme Inspiration Sky King Shoujua. Everyone heard what happened. The 6 sky kings could not do anything to the breakworld people, but Wu Qi was able to hurt the breakworld people and drive them away. The breakworld people were wreaking havoc, and Wu Qi was the only one who could keep everyone safe. Of course, relying on exalted Shoujua for protection would offend the 6 sky kings, but they would not be able to keep their lives. Why would they care about Sky King? The core disciples of the Tao who were made gods did not waver, but the holy immortals of the old celestial court all came to rely on him. The disciples of the little fairies in the outer world, as long as they were not immortal officials or immortal officials, all came to rely on exalted Shoujua. Anyway, when Wu Qi's 5-element formation was set up, countless lights from the 33 skies flew to exalted Shoujua's palace. In just 2 hours, the formation had just been set up, and there were already 1,000,000 immortal officials and immortal officials joining him. The new immortal officials and immortal officials were not just the immortal officials and immortal officials from the General Affairs Department. Even the leaders of some of the stronger departments joined exalted Shoujua. The black fog was still spreading in the 33 skies, and there were still screams coming from everywhere. All the Star Lords and God Kings led their God Soldiers and Sky Generals to fly back and forth, but they were just trying to treat the pain. There was no way to get rid of the root of the problem. After all, they were facing the Breakworld people who could not be killed. With the power of the Star Lords and God Kings, they could chase them away, but they did not have the power to suppress or kill them. Wu Qi was not in a hurry to organize the 5-element formation in the 3 pure skies. He showed off his power for 8 to 10 hours. Then, he brought the mighty formation to the northeast corner of the 3 pure skies to clean up. Inside the 5 elements grand formation, water and fire roared, golden lights flashed, wood thunders rumbled, dirt and mountains were sent flying in all directions. The innate and acquired energies of 5 elements transformed into different colored torrents and poured down, sweeping away the dozens of dark clouds. Every corner of the 33 skies was shocked. The saints who were watching the fight with their god senses were shocked. They tried their best, but they could not get rid of the black fog. Why was Wu Qi able to destroy the black fog so easily? Could it be that there was something special about it? Many god senses went to Wu Qi. All the saints knew the power of the 5-element gods. If they fought the Breakworld people, they might have been able to defeat the Breakworld people. Even the 6 Sky Kings could not get rid of the black fog. The 5-element gods could not destroy it. If the 5-element formation had such a magical effect, the root of it must be Wu Qi. The unscrupulous god senses scanned Wu Qi's body. A few very strong god senses went into Wu Qi's body with evil intent. Wu Qi, who was controlling the 5-element formation to destroy the black fog that was 100,000 miles wide, was furious. He shouted, "Sneaking around! What the hell are you doing? If you have the power, then come and kill the demon. If you don't, then stay in your own home and cry. How dare you provoke me? Do you want to die?" A white light flashed across his forehead. The sky make cauldron was wrapped in white fire. The sky make cauldron was 100,000 feet tall, and it was shining with a spirit light. It was wrapped in Yuan Ling's true flame, which was 100 miles thick. The sky make cauldron emitted a deep roar. Countless hair-thin white flames shot out. They followed the god senses that were looking at Wu Qi's body and burned them. Miserable howls came from all over the 33 heavens, and thousands of beams of starlight soared into the sky, heading straight for the deification pool. All the god senses that dared to peek at Wu Qi were severely injured, and thousands of weaker gods had their divine bodies burned. Yuan Ling escaped, cursing all the way to the deification pool to reform his divine body. Now that he had taken out the sky make cauldron, Wu Qi did not bother to keep a low profile. With his order, the 5-element formation kept drawing innate and acquired energies over, turning them into fuel for the sky make cauldron. The white Yuan Ling's true flame rushed out of the sky make cauldron. Waves of fire swept out in all directions, covering the 3 pure heavens in the blink of an eye. Under the control of Wu Qi's divine sense, the Yuan Ling's true flame did not burn all the dark mist in the 3 pure heavens. But whether it was intentional or not, 90% of the palaces and pavilions in the 3 pure heavens suddenly caught fire as well. The temperature of the flame was extremely high, 1,000,000 times hotter than the true flame of a Tao reasoning primordial immortal. Everything, be it bricks, tiles, or pillars, was burned into nothingness in an instant. But the flame was also very strange. All the palaces and pavilions were burned down, but the immortals inside were safe and sound. Not even a slight injury was seen. Standing in the middle of the 5 elements formation, Wu Qi pointed at the heaven make cauldron and laughed wildly. "Listen up, all the gods in the 33 heavens. I am Wu Qi, a subject of Violet Spirit Great Celestial Emperor. If you want to live, you will have to submit to him. Let me tell you something first. Even if I am going to save someone, under the same conditions, I will naturally save my fellow ministers first." Meanwhile, Wu Qi had also produced the demon-revealing mirror. Powered by his holy power, a green immortal light illuminated the void, illuminating the entire 33 heavens. Several dark shadows that were scurrying about in the 33 heavens were trapped by the green light. Then, Wu Qi gave a loud shout and unleashed a grappling divine ability. Suddenly, a furious roar rang out as Sha Tu, who was clad in black armor and holding a sword, was dragged into the five elements formation by Wu Qi. At the same time, the gods of five elements began to recite the mantra of their headquarters and activate the power of the heavenly Tao that they controlled. Suddenly, the void transformed into a dazzling five-colored light screen. The energies of the five elements, metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, condensed into huge spirit talismans that fell from the sky and attached themselves to the formation. Sha Tu was shocked. With a roar, he waved his sword and slashed at a spirit talisman that was falling from above. Wu Qi's figure flickered and appeared in front of Sha Tu's day. He faced Sha Tu with his bare hands and firmly held Sha Tu's sword in his palms. Sha Tu stared at Wu Qi in shock and cried out, "What a powerful strength! What a strong fleshly body! For you!" While Sha Tu was shouting, Wu Qi unleashed a kick to his crotch. With a loud bang, Sha Tu's crotch armor was shattered. He howled and let go of his sword as he jumped back. Wu Qi dropped his sword and his figure flickered as he closed in on Sha Tu's day. Sha Tu let out a shrill howl, and countless sharp swords suddenly popped out of his armor. His body spun rapidly like a windmill, and he curled up his body and slammed into Wu Qi. High up in the sky, the five righteous gods shouted at the same time. The surrounding spiritual energy suddenly stagnated and the five elements' heavenly Tao sealed the void. The five-colored elemental energy turned into a crystal-clear amber that sealed Sha Tu inside. Wu Qi waved his hands again and again. Yuan Ling True Flame turned into countless head-sized talismans that smashed into the amber, firmly sealing Sha Tu inside. Sha Tu has been executed. What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? Clapping his hands lightly, he snapped at Qianshou and the others who were still fleeing in the 33 heavens. Countless immortals in the 33 heavens saw Wu Qi seal Sha Tu with their divine senses. Compared to the 6 incompetent heavenly emperors, Wu Qi was especially tall, dignified, and extraordinary. For a moment, countless immortal officials were tempted, especially those in the lower heavens. They had their own plans. Inside the Hall of Light, 6 heavenly emperors were sitting across from each other. Yuan Zhen, Great Heavenly Emperor, suddenly sighed and said, "Going with the flow, this kid really knows how to use opportunities. It is a shame we cannot suppress esteemed Shouzhua." Yuan Zhen, Great Heavenly Emperor, also sighed and said, "If you cannot suppress him, then don't suppress him. Going with the flow, then let him rise. If world breakers come, then let them come. Whoever has the ability can go and deal with these devils from the outer realms." Yuan Zhen, Great Heavenly Emperor, sighed and said, "This is good. If Daozu comes out, we won't mistreat esteemed Shouzhua. We gave him a lot of power. If we can give Daozu face, we can explain it. They are just world breakers. If Daozu comes out, then what do we have to worry about?" The 6 of them looked at each other and smiled. Yuan Zhen, Great Heavenly Emperor, clapped his hands, and countless fairies came. They escorted the 6 of them to the Cherishing Fragrance Hall. The Cherishing Fragrance Hall was where Yuan Zhen, Great Heavenly Emperor, held his banquets and enjoyed singing and dancing. Outside, Wu Qi was using the 5 elements formation to attack Thousand Heads and the other world breakers. Chapter 1168. In the southernmost part of Pangu continent, the continent was still absorbing chaotic energy and expanding in all directions. Pangu continent was now extremely large, and its ability to absorb energy was getting stronger and stronger. Every quarter of an hour, the edge of the continent was expanding nearly 1,000,000 miles in all directions. Not even a blade of grass could be seen growing on the new continent, only bare mountains, violent thunderbolts, fire and snowstorms, and violent energy tides that could destroy everything. On the top of a conical volcano that was still erupting, Lu Bang stood with his hands clasped behind his back with a gloomy face. Countless dazzling streams of light were flashing in the distant sky. That was where Pangu continent was constantly expanding. Waves of spiritual energy, which were shockingly dense but also extremely violent, kept gushing toward him from that direction, causing countless sparks to splatter as if they were real tides against his body. Clothes were useless here, for even a supreme-grade gold immortal artifact would be destroyed in 2 or 3 days in such a hellish place. It was even more impossible to use immortal spells to protect one's clothes. The only consequence of using immortal spells in a place like this was to attract countless heavenly thunderbolts and shatter one's body. Therefore, Liu Bang and Han Xian, who stood next to him, were naked, letting the torrents of natural energy and countless pebbles of different sizes wash over their bodies. The pebbles made dull thuds as they smashed into their bodies, and countless sparks burst out when they shattered, making them look like 2 flaming men. Squinting at the flickering light in the distance, Liu Bang took a deep breath, slowly raised his right hand, and clenched it tightly. A piece of great dark gold, which had just been born in the chaotic energy, was caught in his hand and crushed to pieces with just a single squeeze. "You've suffered a lot these days." Liu Bang sighed with a wry smile. A bitter smile also appeared on Han Xian's chiseled face. He shook his head gently and said in a low voice, "Why do you say that, Your Majesty? We are not at the end of the line yet. As long as we are careful, there is always a chance of success." A bright gleam suddenly shot out of Liu Bang's gray eyes, but it was quickly extinguished. He nodded slowly and said, "You're right, there is always a chance. Hee, among the girls we captured yesterday, there are a few young women who are very attractive. I'm going to have a good time with them later." Before his voice could fade away, a large amount of sticky, muddy meat paste of unknown color slowly crawled out of a pool of lava. Wu Xian's hoarse and unpleasant voice rang out slowly, "Your Majesty, are you talking about the few girls with 9 meridians who were favored by Your Majesty yesterday?" I thought Your Majesty had already used them, so I've already used them as medicine today. If Your Majesty wants more women, I'll just send them over." Liu Bang looked back at Wu Xian, but Han Xian did not move at all. Wu Xian struggled to climb out of the lava. His body, which was more than 100 miles wide, was covered in the lava pool of the crater. The hot lava was burning him, and the heavenly fire that could only be born in the chaos made him sizzle. But he only grunted comfortably a few times, and then a tall and strong man emerged from the middle of his body. The man looked at Liu Bang and said in a strange voice, "The restrictive spells of these seniors are so strange that I can only use the heat of the volcano to offset some of the pain. Hey, Your Majesty, please come with me. Everything has been prepared. Today is Your Majesty's good day. Hee, the 9 great soul clones have once again become one. Your Majesty will be able to possess supernatural powers. Isn't this something worth celebrating?" Liu Bang shook his head gently and sighed in a low voice. Han Xian blinked a few times before heaving a long sigh. Wu Xian squirmed for a while, then suddenly breathed a deep sigh. The man on top of him shook his head helplessly and said in a low voice, "One is trapped under a low wall. TSK, I really don't understand why Your Majesty would take that Huan Yen as your master back then." Amidst the strange laughter, 2 thick tentacles stretched out of Wu Xian's body. Liu Bang and Han Xian looked at the tentacles with disgust, then helplessly were rolled up by them and carried by Wu Xian toward the bottom of the 10,000-mile-high volcano. Wu Xian moved very fast, and it only took him less than an hour to come to a remote valley at the foot of the mountain. There were human bone stakes everywhere in the deep valley, and countless huge, grotesque skeletons were stuck on top of the thick human bone pillars. These skeletons were still grinning and moving, and from time to time, they let out deep, gruesome howls. Occasionally, a few wisps of ghost fire would burst out of nowhere, making the valley look no different from hell. A vast expanse of black mist enveloped the valley, which was the same as the one raging in the celestial court, except that it was thicker and thicker. The mist in the celestial court was still a little sparse, but here, it was so thick that it shone like iron, and from time to time, countless ghost howls could be heard coming from it. In the valley, there were 999 huge human bone furnaces. Each of these furnaces was over 10,000 zhang tall, and contained only one kind of fuel, which was all kinds of white bones. The ghastly white bones were shrouded in green the wisps, and the eerie the wisps rose up, turning the entire furnace into a wretched green. Huan Yen sat cross-legged on one of the furnaces, beaming as she watched thousands of huge fiend gods from outer domains whip the fiend gods who walked past them in groups with long whips in their hands. Expressionless and soulless, the fiend gods lined up and walked toward the bone furnaces, then jumped into the evil ghost fire one after another. Some of the fiend gods had extremely strong life forces. When they fell into the furnaces and burned, they could still raise their hands and howl at the sky. However, when most of the fiend gods touched the green ghost fire, they were burned into wisps of black smoke. The black smoke rose and blended into the black mist that enveloped the valley in the sky. There were thousands of black doors in the sky, and the fiend gods from outer domains walked out of them one by one, lining up and walking into the furnaces. With the scale of the 999 furnaces, the number of fiend gods they smelted every day was more than 10 million. Beside Huan Yen were 2 wisps of black smoke. Occasionally, they would let out deep, strange laughter. It was as if the sight of the fiend gods being slaughtered casually made them very happy. Seeing that they were on equal footing with Huan Yen, they should also be world breakers. Lu Bang and Han Xan were brought to Huan Yan's side by Wu Xian. Wu Xian called out, "Patriarch Huan Yen," in a flattering manner. Huan Yen slowly turned his head to look at Lu Bang. With a faint smile, he said, "My disciple, you used to split your divine sense into 9 places to plan something big. It was a good plan, but if you split your divine sense, you will be weak. If you work together, you will be strong. There is no need for you to split your divine sense. You'd better merge them again." Gently patting Lu Bang's shoulder, Huan Yen said coolly, "I know you are looking for the soul fixation pearl, but wasn't it taken away by someone? But it doesn't matter. With the secret divine abilities of your 2 martial uncles, you will definitely be able to smoothly merge those 8 divine senses. Hee, when your cultivation base improves greatly, I will need your help with many things." Lu Bang bowed respectfully to Huan Yen, then said with a faint smile, "I will need your guidance in the future, Master." Huan Yen grinned and waved at Wu Xian. Wu Xian chuckled, then brought Lu Bang and Han Xian deeper into the valley. When Wu Xian was far away, one of the shadows beside Huan Yen laughed and said in a low voice, "How stupid your disciple is. Did he really believe you when you promised him that you would let him live in the future?" Huan Yen narrowed his eyes and said, "It doesn't matter whether he really believes me or not. What matters is that he is very tactful. After I came to him, he obediently cooperated with me, and the cooperation was not bad. If not for him, how could I have gathered so many materials, laid out an array, and brought you here so quickly?" Huan Yen sighed and said coolly, "When this world is completely destroyed by us, let him die a quick death. That is the relationship between us as master and disciple." The 2 shadows laughed at the same time, twisting their bodies. Groups of demon gods from other worlds were still walking toward the human bone cauldron. They lined up in Chi-Chi and threw themselves into the green ghost fire, turning into wisps of black smoke and fusing with the smoke above their heads. The 3 world breakers looked up into the sky at the same time. One of the shadows said in a low voice, "Sha Tu is going to kill to his heart's content this time. As for Yang, before he is done playing, don't expect him to be of any use. As for Thousand Heads and Spirit Puppet, they should be able to recover a little more this time, right?" Wu Xian quickly brought Lu Bang and Han Xian to the end of the valley. It was also a bloody and evil place, with countless broken limbs all over the ground. In the middle of the valley was a blood pool, about 100 miles in circumference and of unknown depth. Thick blood rolled in the pool, and occasionally, a few twisted black faces could be seen twisting and struggling in the blood pool. Next to the blood pool stood thousands of strange-looking members of the forbidden races. They held bone knives and were methodically dragging women who were crying and screaming. They cut off their heads and poured all their blood into the pool. As fresh blood was poured into the pool, the blood water in the pool began to boil even more violently. Next to the blood pool stood 8 black stone pillars. 8 men who looked exactly like Lu Bang were tied to the pillars, lifelessly. Among them were the undying god emperor that Wu Qi had seen before. Clearly, these 8 men were Lu Bang's doppelgangers, which he had created using a secret technique of the forbidden races. Lu Bang looked at the strange blood pool, gritted his teeth, and said, "Wu Xian, I know you sold me out to Huan Yen. That is why all 8 of my doppelgangers were captured." Lu Bang took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "If I don't die, I'll definitely annihilate your forbidden clan." Wu Xian chuckled, then shook his head gently and said, "Even if you don't die, when you merge with these 8 fools again, you will only be a puppet, a tool. How can you fight against me? Your Majesty, it was you who schemed against me first. It was you who schemed against my forbidden race first. How can you blame me for this? World breakers, they are stronger and stronger backers than you. Why wouldn't I turn to them?" Accompanied by a deep, strange laugh, Wu Xian threw Lu Bang into the blood pool. "All right, send your majesties in. Hee, with the forbidden race's doppelganger technique, I divided them into 9 doppelgangers and then fused them back into one." Wu Xian howled hysterically, "With the blood of tens of millions of extreme Yin and the blood of millions of gods and demons that I have collected for so many years, I really don't know what kind of miracle I can create. Hee, the elixir of immortality? Hee, your majesty Lu Bang? Are you ready to become a puppet and a tool? Actually, what are world breakers?" Wu Xian's voice was so soft that only he could barely hear him. Chapter 1169. In the 33 heavens, Wu Qi commanded the gods of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth to wipe out the breakers. The black fog, which the other gods could not deal with, was easily destroyed by Wu Qi like a piece of paper. In addition to Sha Tu, Wu Qi had also surrounded and suppressed Yang Shao with a formation, then imprisoned him with a supreme divine ability. Seeing that things were not going well, Qianshou and Ling Shou did not dare to face Wu Qi again. They hurriedly broke through the western heavenly gate and fled. For a moment, the celestial court was shocked. Of the 4 breakers that even the 6 celestial emperors could not deal with, 2 were imprisoned and 2 were driven away by Wu Qi. With that, Wu Qi's reputation immediately rose above the 6 celestial emperors. Because of Wu Qi, the great celestial emperor's reputation soared as well. Many immortal officials of the celestial court who were not from the Tao League came to join him, and even some people of high status. Among them were Gui Tanluo, Taisher Demon, Desolate Emperor, and Bai Ling, who were once the lords of the 4 realms. When they joined the Tao League and the Buddhist League, the promises they received were excellent, but when the elites of the 4 realms were completely wiped out, the Tao League and the Buddhist League immediately turned their backs on them. Gui Tanluo did not even get the position of the great emperor of the Netherworld. Instead, fearing that he would rise to power in the Netherworld, he banished him to the celestial court. Now, the Lord of the 4 realms was just a celestial officer of the 4 seasons under the command of a divine emperor under Yuan Zhen, who was in charge of the flowering and wilting of the 4 seasons. The former Lord of the 4 realms was a top figure in Pangu world, but now he was in charge of the flowering and wilting in the celestial court. Not to mention that the heavenly Tao had its own rules, and there was no need to worry about the flowering and wilting. The position was just too depressing. When Wu Qi first sought refuge with esteemed Shou Zhuo, these 4 former realm lords were still a little suspicious, fearing that Wu Qi was not a match for the 6 celestial emperors, and that if they rashly sought refuge with him, they would be punished by the celestial emperors. But when they saw that Wu Qi's strength and methods far surpassed the Sky Emperors, the 4 great realm lords steeled their hearts and decided to go all out and join him. In terms of their authority, these 4 people had no influence on the celestial court. They were nothing more than the 4 seasons flower blooming and withering flowers gods. What could they do? However, their identities before they were conferred as gods were too crucial. As soon as they sought refuge, the elites from the ghost realm, the devil realm, the spirit realm, and the demon realm all came to seek refuge. Although these people did not have high positions in the celestial court, they were large in number and occupied more than 80% of the lower-level officials in the celestial court. In particular, at least 90% of the soldiers and heavenly generals of the celestial court were transformed from the people of the 4 realms. With these people, Wu Qi had almost directly controlled more than half of the military strength of the celestial court. Apart from the 1,080,000 celestial lords who were infeft by the elites of the Tao League, the righteous gods of the various departments, and the celestial generals who held important positions, almost all the middle and lower-level soldiers and heavenly generals of the celestial court had joined Wu Qi. Even if these soldiers and heavenly generals did not dare to really disobey the edict of their superiors, it was enough to give the upper echelons of the celestial court a headache. Seeing that Wu Qi's momentum was growing stronger and stronger, and there was a faint sign that he was going to force them to abdicate, the 6 celestial emperors did not take any action other than asking for Sha Tu and Yang Qiao to be imprisoned in prison. Wu Qi ignored them. He and esteemed Shou Zhuo were busy straightening out the relationship between the many immortal officials and officials under their command, and had no time to greet the 6 celestial emperors. While the celestial court was in turmoil, new changes were finally taking place on Pangu continent. Zhang Tingyun was the new emperor of the human race conferred by Daozu. He was not chosen by the human race, but conferred by the heavenly Tao. Inheriting the destiny of the human race and the laws of the heavenly Tao, Zhang Tingyun's current overall strength was enough to fight against a top-tier Tao-breaking expert. The newly established imperial court of the human race was named Xian, which meant the imperial court of the Tao League. Zhang Tingyun's era name was Leaping to Heaven. Leaping to heaven and ascending to heaven was a phrase often used by cultivators. This year was the 99th year since Zhang Tingyun ascended to the throne, which was also the 99th year of ascension. After nearly 100 years, the Xian dynasty had not been able to set up an effective administrative system. The Xian dynasty didn't lack high-level officials. They had all sorts of high-level officials like prime ministers and imperial censors. However, the Xian dynasty had very few local officials. The territory left behind by Diyu was too vast, with countless people, cities, villages and towns, and countless local officials. Today, except for the 3,000 provinces around Yuxiong Plain, there were not many Xian officials in the administrative districts left behind by Diyu. More than 99% of the vast territory was still in a state of local autonomy. Fortunately, the people of Diyu had long been accustomed to this state, and the people of Diyu had always been simple and honest. They worked at sunrise and rested at sunset, and for nearly 100 years, the vast Xian dynasty, which did not have enough administrative agencies to cover it, had not encountered any trouble. But just a few days after Wu Qi drove the realm breakers out of the celestial court, the Xian dynasty faced its biggest crisis. At the southern border of the Xian dynasty, Wu Xian, who had covered an area of hundreds of miles in a sticky substance, was wriggling toward the north. Clad in a black imperial robe, Liu Bang stood on Wu Xian's back, looking gloomily at the boundless land in front of him. Behind Liu Bang stood thousands of civil and military officials. These were all the people Liu Bang had gathered through countless reincarnations in the mortal world. Among them, Wu Qi was familiar with Zhang Liang, Xiao He, Han Xan, Fan Kuai, and beside them were Xia Hoying, Chao Can, Qin Ping, Zhou Bo, and other founding generals of the Han dynasty. Aside from these people, the other thousands of people were heroes recruited by Liu Bang during his reincarnation. All of them had been secretly brought to Pangu world from the mortal world, becoming his loyal subordinates. Many of these people used to follow his 8 doppelgangers. But now that he had merged all 8 doppelgangers into one, these people had returned to his side. The strongest among them was only a peak-level gold immortal, but their wits and means were all extraordinary. Otherwise, how could they have caught Liu Bang's attention? Apart from these thousands of Liu Bang's trusted subordinates, there were more people from the forbidden clans, who looked strange and inhuman. Some of them had 3 heads, 6 arms, and 4 feet, some had holes in their bellies, some had human heads and beast bodies, and some had animal heads and human bodies. All kinds of strange and cruel things were hard to count. In short, this place was like a hodgepodge zoo, with all kinds of strange body parts. Many of them did not have a human form like Wu Xian. They were either a wriggling meatball, a twisted shadow, or a puff of black smoke. Some of them were just powerful mental waves. For the forbidden clans, they could change their bodies and spirits at will. They were a terrible race that could even use themselves as a tool to change themselves at will. Wu Xian conscientiously acted as a mount and carried these people northward. Gradually, a vast expanse of fertile land and towns appeared in front of them, and further away, a city that could accommodate about 100,000 people could be vaguely seen. The Xian dynasty had only a history of 100 years, and they had not had the time to set up their administrative agencies in the southernmost part of the southern region. Therefore, there was no government or military here. In such a large area, there were only a few highly respected elders chosen by the common people to form a council of elders to manage it. Because of the change of dynasties between the Yu and the Xian dynasty, many places on Pangu continent had returned to this tribal alliance system. Wu Xian stopped when he was dozens of miles away from the nearest village. His body shrunk rapidly. Gradually, his gigantic body shrunk into a meatball that was only 10 feet in circumference. The grayish-brown meatball wriggled for a while, then gradually turned into a 3-meter-tall man with a dignified appearance. His skin was wriggling like flowing magma, and from time to time, a few ferocious faces could be seen roaring and rushing out from under his grayish-brown skin, making him look particularly disgusting and ferocious. Lu Bang gave Wu Xian a disgusted look. He took a deep breath, pointed a finger behind him, and cried out in a deep voice, "Stay here!" The forbidden clans let out a strange, hoarse laugh as they looked at Wu Xian at the same time. Wu Xian nodded slowly. Laughing strangely, he put on a cloak that covered his whole head and followed closely at Lu Bang's side. Reluctantly, the forbidden clans scattered into the distant mountains. Immediately, the shrill howls of wild beasts rang out from those mountains. Lu Bang took a deep breath and walked slowly toward the village with his many subordinates. About a dozen miles away from the village, Lu Bang and his companions ran into a group of young men who had come out of the village to herd sheep. A group of young men, who were playing and wrestling, looked warily at the thousands of well-dressed men and asked cautiously about the origin of Lu Bang and his companions. After pondering for a moment, Lu Bang gave Wu Xian a somewhat humiliated look. He took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "I'm Ji Bang, the 98th son of Emperor Haozuan of Diyu. I met a divine man in a dream. He said that the emperor of the Xian dynasty was tyrannical and had killed countless people, making the world miserable. So, he gave me a divine sword to punish him." Slowly pulling out a sword that emitted a cold aura and was guarded by 2 black dragons, Lu Bang cried out, "By the order of the ancestors of the human race, the Yellow Emperor Xinyuan and the Yen Emperor Shenong, I will rebuild Diyu, punish the tyrannical emperor of the Xian dynasty, and restore peace to Pangu continent." The young men were stunned. The concepts of Diyu and the Xian dynasty were so strange to them. Not to mention the Xian dynasty, which had nothing to do with them now. Even when Diyu was at its peak, there was only one small, remote, and impoverished county within millions of miles, a county governed by only 3 to 5 small cities, and only 3 to 5 soldiers. In such a remote place, the old people only knew that it seemed to be under the rule of an imperial court called Diyu. But they did not know what Diyu meant or what the Xian dynasty was, let alone a place that had not been managed by the government for 100 years. These young men only knew that it was the council of elders who handled the disputes among the people, and they had no idea what the disputes between Diyu and the Xian dynasty were. Speaking of which, these young men were illiterate, and they could not even write their own names. Who would care what Diyu and the Xian dynasty did? Ignoring these dumbfounded young men, Lu Bang strode forward with the long sword in his hand, heading straight for the city in front of him. 2 hours later, the flag of Diyu fluttered over the top of the city. Chapter 1170. Deep in the mountains. There were at least 10,000 mountains, large and small, in this place where Lu Bang had rebuilt Great Yu. The largest of them, Mount Wushao, was nearly 1,000 miles in circumference, and its main peak was 30,000 feet high. It was the master of all the mountains in this area. Sitting cross-legged under a plum tree in the mountains, Duke Wushao was exercising a cultivation technique with a long face, constantly absorbing natural energy and circulating it in his body according to the cultivation technique he had learned in the past. But his body was cold and empty, and he could not sense any energy at all. Wu Xiaogong sighed disappointedly and waved his hand. A clump of natural energy condensed into a tiny lightning bolt and shot out from the top of his head. A 1,000 feet squared rock on the opposite cliff was shattered by the lightning bolt, and some of the rock powder was melted into boiling lava and sprayed in all directions. Then he pointed his finger out again, and the scattered rock powder and lava flew back to him and reformed into the rock. Everything was going according to his will. He could still sense the natural energy, transform it into wind, fire, thunder, and many other magic to attack his enemies, and even possess some mighty divine abilities that he could never imagine before. But he was still unhappy, very unhappy. Before he was conferred the title of divinity, he was the ruler of a small, desolate galaxy in an outer heavenly realm. It had 4 planets inhabited by mortals, and a total of more than 10 billion mortals. As the ancestral master of the strongest immortal sect in that galaxy, although he only had the cultivation base of a 35th tier heaven immortal, he was a supreme existence in that galaxy. But when the Tao League issued a decree, 50% of the mortals on the planet and all his disciples had no choice but to migrate to a heavenly realm. After that, the immortal monarch of the celestial court who guarded that heavenly realm used a mystic art to drive the huge heavenly realm across the void to Pangu continent, merging with it. What followed was the Grand War of Divinity. The unlucky Duke Wuxiao himself only had the cultivation base of a 35th tier heaven immortal, and the strongest among his disciples was only peak stage nascent divinity realm. Unfortunately, his entire sect was transferred to the Ling dynasty, assigned by a general of the Ling dynasty to fight against Yu, the terrible existence called King of East Sea. In the end, all 8,000 of his disciples were killed in just one battle, and he was stabbed to death by a fellow named Lord Xianxing. After that came a long wait in the investiture of gods. No one knew how long he had waited, but he suddenly had a new body and could see the light of day again. Furthermore, the Tao ancestor had conferred him the title of the mountain god of Wuxiao Peak. He had 3,000 mountain gods and 5,000 earth gods under his command. Every mountain god and earth god had 30 to 50 nether soldiers under them. In total, he had 400,000 soldiers under him. The 3,000 mountain gods and 5,000 earth gods were once disciples of Wu Xiaogong. There were a total of 8,000 disciples, and all of them had become Yin masters. And because he did not have any backer, he was assigned to Wuxiao Peak. But when he came here, he really wanted to cry. His territory spanned nearly 10 million miles, and there were only 3 small counties left by Diyu, with a total population of less than 1 million. It had been nearly 100 years since he became a god, and he had more or less figured out the situation of his current body. It was a divine body condensed by the power of the heavenly Tao. It had 5 internal organs, but the so-called meridians and blood vessels were only 2 or 3. These meridians and blood vessels could allow him to perform all kinds of divine magic, but he could no longer cultivate. No matter how hard he tried for 100 years and repeated it tens of thousands of times, he still could not cultivate the Taoist book that had helped him embark on the path of immortality. Unable to cultivate, all his power was the divine power given to him by the heavenly Tao when he became a god. He made a rough calculation. His cultivation had improved a lot, and his strength should be about the same as a 27th tier heaven immortal. But his divine body was the body of a Yin god, and could not be compared to the bodies of the heavenly gods of the celestial court. When he appeared under the scorching sun in broad daylight, he would feel a little dizzy, and the divine power in his body would gradually disperse. The divine bodies obtained by the heavenly Tao were divided into different grades. Among the gods of heaven, gods of earth, and gods of underworld, the celestial court's divine body was undoubtedly the strongest in divine power and inherited the heavenly Tao's masculine power. The gods of underworld in the netherworld were integrated with the netherworld's aura and one with treacherous changes. The gods of earth in the mortal world were city gods, earth gods, and mountain gods. They had the effect of driving the power of the earth. The bodies of the earthly gods were divided into 9 grades and 18 ranks, which corresponded to the 18 ranks of the earthly gods. Wuxiao's divine body was the lowest grade, the 17th rank, which was only 1 rank higher than that of his disciples. With such a weak divine body, the divine power he could control was very weak. The only way to improve his divine power was to receive sacrifices from the common people and gradually improve his divine power and the grade of his divine body through the power of faith. However, Wushao Peak had a circumference of several million miles, and there were only 1 million civilians, while he had 8,000 disciples. 1 million civilians worshipped 8,000 gods. How many years and months would it take for him to accumulate enough power of faith to improve himself? Besides, the common people on Pangu continent had heads like rocks. They worshipped the heaven, the earth, and their ancestors, but not the mountain gods or the earth. Several times, Wushao had used his divine power to appear in the dreams of the common people at the foot of the mountain, asking them to offer sacrifices to him. But those stubborn people would always forget about the dream when dawn came. It had been almost 100 years, and he and his 8,000 disciples had not found a single believer. This is so hard. Letting out a soft sigh, Wushao Duke narrowed his eyes with a frown. For the umpteenth time, he circulated the cultivation method that he was extremely familiar with. But it still did not work. The natural energy was rushing in and out of his body, but nothing was left. He could control the natural energy and turn it into earth, fire, wind, and thunder to attack the enemy, but he could not use it to bring him any practical benefits. Sighing in distress, he grabbed the spear next to him and could not help but twitch his lips. Although he was once a disciple of the Tao League, he could not help but complain about the aesthetic standards of the Daozu. What was going on? In the past, Wushao Gong was used by the patriarch of the immortal cultivation sect. He used a flying sword that shone brightly. He could control the sword to fly and drive the sword light to kill people from thousands of miles away. How elegant was that? Now that he was a deity, he could only use a spear. Holding the spear, he slammed it against the ground a few times and cursed under his breath, "I don't know anything about spear techniques, so why do I need a spear? Mountain god, must a mountain god use a spear? Who says mountain gods can't use flying swords? It's a pity for this old man's red cloud sword. I don't know who has gotten the benefit now." With a wry smile, Wushao rose to his feet and looked into the distance. The mountains on Pangu continent were endless. No one knew how many mountains and hills there were on the vast Pangu continent, and no one knew how many lowly land gods were having the same thoughts as Wushao Duke. The patriarch of the immortal sect, who used to stand high above the masses, had fallen to such a state. With a wry smile, Wushao grabbed the spear and slammed it against the mountain wall. Immediately, dozens of ghost soldiers transformed from heavenly ghosts rushed out of the mountain wall, cursing. Wushao let out a few strange howls, and the ghost soldiers hurriedly grabbed their weapons, transformed into a gust of chilly wind, and sped away. Wushao jumped up and down and shouted, "Remember! Bring me 2 male deer. I want to eat deer blood soup today." After shouting a few times, he suddenly shook his head in a self-deprecating manner. Since he became an immortal, he had not tasted food for thousands of years. He did not expect that after being conferred the title of mountain god, he would have the desire for good food again. After all, he was only a yin deity of the lowest grade, and could not be compared with those high-grade earth gods like the great emperors of the 3 mountains. After sighing with emotion for a while, Wushao threw away the spear and lay down on a boulder with his legs crossed. He began to count on his fingers. "I can't go on like this. I have to find a way to stimulate the common people down the mountain to hurry up and have babies. In another 100 years, if I can have a population of over 10 million and millions of believers who are afraid of ghosts and gods, my life will be much better." It was said that in Yuxiong Plain, the heart of the Xian dynasty, there was a city god temple, as well as a mountain god temple and an earth god temple. The people there should be living a good life, right? But all the mountain gods and earth gods in Yuxiong Plain were at least third-tier yin deities, and even the weakest among them had the overall strength of a gold immortal. Just as Wushao was murmuring to himself, a chilly wind blew silently to his side, and a hoarse voice rang out, "Hee, are you Wushao Gong, the mountain god of this area? The former ancestral master of the White Sword sect, by Jianwang?" Wushao Gong shuddered with fear. Hastily, he jumped to his feet, grabbed the spear, and glanced around vigilantly. After being conferred the title of Mountain God, his once sensitive divine sense had been weakened by more than half. As a result, he failed to notice the approaching enemies. Two men with goat-like bodies and 4 horns on their heads were standing on a rock behind Wu Shaogong, looking at him with evil intentions. They had the bodies of goats, but they walked like humans, and they had 4 horns on their heads, giving him an evil look. Wu Shaogong could not help but suck in a cold breath when he saw them. "May I ask what business you have with me, seniors?" he asked through clenched teeth. The 2 men laughed weirdly at the same time. After laughing for a long time, the man on the left waved a heavy bone hammer that was made of human skulls and said with a smile, "You mountain gods are so pitiful. TSK, you are just a bunch of lonely ghosts and poor immortals. Hee, do you want to change your destiny? Do you want to stand high above the masses? Do you want to have everyone answer to your call? Do you want to hold great power? Do you want to restore the prestige and glory that you should have as the ancestor of a sect?" Every word from the 2 men struck right into Wu Shaogong's heart. He stared at them with a changing look in his eyes. The man on the right saw the struggle in Wu Shaogong's heart. He laughed coldly and said, "We are the protectors of the human race under the command of the Holy Mother of the human race, Huang clan, in Empress Hua Palace. Now Jibang, the 98th son of the former human emperor of Diyu, Emperor Haozuan, wants to rebuild Diyu and re-establish the throne of Diyu. He needs a talented man like you to work with him." Wu Shaogong remained silent for a long while, then nodded and said, "As the mountain god, I am under the control of the upper gods." The man on the left fished out a black bone talisman and threw it to Wu Shaogong. "Refine this talisman and hang it on your body. With that, not even the great emperors of the 3 mountains can control you," he said with a strange laugh. Wu Shaogong clenched the bone talisman tightly in his palm. A few days later, Wu Shaogong's immediate superior, the chief mountain god of the southern region of Pangu continent, received a routine report from Wu Shaogong. The southern region was safe and sound. Chapter 1171. Traveling westward from the translucent palace in the center of the 33 heavens for 9 days and 9 nights at the speed of a primordial immortal, there was a great lake with a bizarre golden blue color. It was called a lake, but in fact, it was a boundless ocean the size of hundreds of provinces on Pangu continent. It was the Celestial Lake, the headquarters of the only navy of the Celestial Court, under the command of the Celestial Court's Navy Marshal, the Northern Sacred Canopy. The former Northern Sacred Canopy had unfortunately fallen in the fierce battle when the fiend gods from the outer realms invaded the 33 heavens, and his deputies, the 8 dragon generals, had fled the Celestial Court with all the members of the Navy because of Ao Buzan's summons. The current Northern Sacred Canopy was a newly conferred god in the War of Investiture of the Gods, and all the Navy under his command were aquatic demons who had fallen in the War of Investiture. While Wu Qi was expelling and sealing the realm breakers, the 6 great celestial emperors were having a banquet with a dozen men in Taoist robes on a small island that looked like a bonsai above the heavenly lake. Each of the men in Taoist robes had the cultivation base of a Tao-breaking expert, and they were clearly among the 99 sect masters who served Daozu. During the War of Investiture of the Gods, the Huang clan had laid an ambush in Liangzhu and sent dozens of sect masters into the investiture of the gods. But, after the War of Investiture of the Gods, the Tao League, with its profound foundation, immediately filled up the positions of the 99 sect masters. The 18 men in Taoist robes on the island were the new sect masters of the Tao League. They were the true hermits of the Tao League, whose names were never known to outsiders, and all their information was absolutely confidential. Since the Celestial Court was conferred the title of gods, they had spent most of their time guarding the heavenly lake, except for occasionally returning to the Daluotian Empire to take care of the affairs. Although it was a long way from the translucent palace, with their overall strength, it only took them a single step to get there. They were the helpers the Tao sect had prepared for the 6 great celestial emperors. As long as they had their help, the positions of the 6 great celestial emperors would be as stable as Mount Tai. Great celestial emperor Yuan Yen raised his wine vessel and laughed heartily. With that little Wu Qi fighting with all his might, we can rest easy. Let him fight the world breakers. We just need to wait for Daozu to come out, and we will succeed. Everyone on the island laughed in unison. Even the cranes that landed beside them raised their wings and chirped, appearing to be very happy. Great Celestial Emperor Yuan Yen chuckled and said, "At first, we deliberately suppressed Lord Shouzhua for the sake of our reputation. I think he must have suffered a lot. If Shouzhua wants power, we will give it to him. If he wants people, we will give them people. Fighting with breakworld beings is too risky. There are people who are willing to take the risk. Why don't we just go with the flow?" The group of people clapped and laughed again. They raised their wine vessels and drank to their heart's content. After laughing for a while, a man in Taoist robes smiled and said, "Senior brothers, you are happy. You are sitting on the fishing platform, so you will get credit. Poor Lord Shouzhua and little Wu Qi. They worked so hard, but in the end, they only helped the 6 senior brothers. But now that break-world beings have appeared, they dared to come to the celestial court and make trouble. Is there any movement in the human world?" The 6 great celestial emperors looked at each other. Great Celestial Emperor Yuan Zhu took out a pale yellow scroll from his sleeve and opened it. A purple light pattern flashed on the scroll. Great Celestial Emperor Yuan Zhu read the scroll for a while and nodded slowly. "The lower worlds are safe. Every land of the mountain gods has sent official documents. Whether it is the city, the village, the wilderness, the deep sea, or the great river, everything is peaceful." Everyone nodded and looked up at the sky with a smile of infinite admiration. Great Celestial Emperor Yuan Zhu sighed and said, "Daozu has great foresight. After he used the power of the Way of Heaven to become a god, our Dao sects will have nothing to worry about. As long as we have the Way of Heaven in our hands, who in Pangu world can be our opponent?" Speaking of pride, Great Celestial Emperor Yuan Zhu sneered and said that Wu Qi focused on collecting the old people left in the celestial court. Let him do that. Do you think break-world beings are so easy to deal with? There will be casualties among them. When all the disloyal people are dead, the celestial court will be at peace. The 18 new sect masters nodded and raised their wine vessels, praising Great Celestial Emperor Yuan Zhu for being reasonable. While the 6 great celestial emperors and the 18 new Dao sects were feasting, Wu Qi had secretly left the 33 heavens and headed straight for the sky beyond heaven. His escape art was so profound that no one could find him. It would take an ordinary immortal months to come to the heaven beyond heaven from the 33 heavens, but he did not fly at his fastest speed. Instead, he flew slowly upward on a cloud, and it only took him 10 minutes to reach the entrance of the heaven beyond heaven. Since the end of the apotheosis, when the Xian dynasty replaced Yu, the Wahuang clan had joined hands with the 18 Dao fusing experts of the Holy Alliance to completely seal the sky beyond heaven. What appeared in front of Wu Qi at the moment was a vast expanse of hazy purple mist, which occupied his entire field of vision. If an ordinary immortal, even a Dao-breaking realm great overarching golden immortal, dared to enter this purple mist, he would be lost and confused, and it would take him many years to get out. There was no spirit chi at all in the area covered by this purple mist, and ordinary immortals would probably be trapped to death if they entered it. In Wu Qi's eyes, this purple mist quickly transformed into a vast sea of runes. Every rune was shining with a dazzling light. In this boundless sea of light, one could vaguely see a faintly discernible crack. There was a huge number of runes near the crack, and their density was also astonishing. The runes were so dense that they almost piled up into a small mountain. All the runes were glowing with vibrant colors and intertwined with each other, and from time to time, they exuded an enormous aura of spirit power that only Dao fusing stage mighty figures or above could sense. What an ingenious restrictive spell! Wu Qi looked to the left and right, then suddenly raised his right hand and cried out, "Axe!" A bright gleam flashed, and a gigantic battle axe slowly emerged from Wu Qi's palm. It was bronze in color, and seemed to be bursting with yellow and black mist from time to time. It looked very ancient. It was as if Wu Qi's palm was a piece of fertile soil, and the axe was a sapling that was slowly growing from the fertile soil. Wu Qi casually tossed the axe, which was over 1,000 feet long. The axe tore through the void, and all the spirit chi in its path was completely pulverized. The spirit chi of heaven and earth was restored to the most primitive innate 5 elements yuan chi, and the innate 5 elements yuan chi was once again pulverized into yin and yang chi. In the end, even yin and yang chi were completely turned into nothingness. The axe slashed through the void, bringing with it a chaotic wall of chi. With a loud bang, the vast sea of purple chi suddenly collapsed, and the giant axe fiercely chopped on a thin line in the void, bursting out a blinding light. Strange flashes of countless colors flickered rapidly, and a few faint cries of surprise could be heard. Suddenly, a crack appeared in front of them, and rich spirit chi surged out of it. A fiery spear fiercely thrust out of the crack and smashed the axe brutally. Greathorns' burly voice rang out like a thunderclap. "Where did you come from? How dare you come to heaven beyond heaven to stir up trouble? Are you courting death?" The axe that had just smashed all the restrictions in heaven beyond heaven had exhausted all its power. When Greathorn struck out with the spear, the axe shattered with a crisp ringing sound, turning into countless specks of light that scattered in all directions. A scorching wave of fire transformed into thousands of crimson dragons and rushed out of the crack. Clad in a crimson armor made of lava, Greathorns rushed out together with the dragons like a ferocious fiend. Greathorns was taken aback when he saw Wu Qi. Then he burst into laughter, dispelled all the fire dragons behind him, and stretched out both hands to greet Wu Qi. "Ha! Old man Yuan Ling, how did you find me here?" Smiling, Wu Qi took a few steps forward. But before he could say anything, Greathorns had punched Wu Qi in the face. The fist, the size of a wine jar, rained down on Wu Qi like a meteor shower. "Somebody! Brothers, let's kill this guy together!" Greathorns bellowed. How could this damned old man Yuan Ling have such a strong cultivation base to break the restrictive spells we've cast together? This must be that bastard Huan Yen. Kill him. Help me kill him. Wu Qi was stunned by Greathorns' storm-like fist, but he did not suffer any loss. He just stood where he was and let Greathorns' fists hit his face and upper body crazily. Each blow could easily destroy a part of the starry sky, and each blow could kill dozens or hundreds of Dao-breaking experts at will. But when such heavy fists, which came with a high temperature strong enough to burn the void, hit Wu Qi's face, they had no effect other than producing loud booms and sending out countless sparks. Even Wu Qi's face did not turn red, and his body did not move at all. Although Greathorns did not manage to explore all the legacies in the Seven Holiness Palace, Wu Qi's overall strength was no longer comparable to Greathorns. Especially his fleshly body, which had been tempered and cleansed countless times by the holy power, it had become so strong that it could make any Dao-fusing expert despair. Now, even if hundreds of supreme treasures of primal from Pangu world smashed him in the face at the same time, Wu Qi's face would not even twitch. On the contrary, those treasures would most likely shatter and scatter all over the sky. Greathorns' roar soon attracted several powerful auras, and several divine will locked onto Wu Qi. An extremely terrible force was brewing in the void, as more than 6 Dao-fusing experts were mobilizing all their forces, preparing to give Wu Qi a heavy blow. Among them was the aura of the myriad spirit cauldron, which Wu Qi was already familiar with. Clearly, the Wuhuang clan had joined the attack as well. Wu Qi could not help but smile bitterly. Hastily, he produced the heaven refining cauldron and unleashed the Yuan Ling true flame, which was thousands of times hotter than Greathorns' natal divine flame. Wait, even if that Huan Yen can change his appearance, can he control my natal spirit treasure? He cried out. Greathorns and his companions were struck dumb as soon as the heaven refining cauldron appeared. Chapter 1172. When Wu Qi broke the seal cast by the saints of the human realm beyond heaven, the strong vibration shook the entire Pangu world. Naturally, the Daoyuotian Palace of Dao Yuan was not spared. The Daoyuotian Palace, which was not far from the human realm beyond heaven, was the first to feel the impact. The huge palace shook violently for a few times, and the tiles rattled for a long while. Many disciples of the Tao League in the palace fell to the ground almost simultaneously. Whether it was the Taoist who was washing and cooking, or the high and mighty sect leader, everyone felt an irresistible and terrifying power from this wave of shock. It was like a baby facing the threat of a dragon, a tremor and fear that came from the depths of his soul. The person who made this strike shook the entire Pangu world was an existence that these powerful Tao League figures could not resist together. In the innermost hall of the palace of Tao Yuan, the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs, who were sitting cross-legged, opened their eyes at the same time. Their bodies were shaking, but they were not as embarrassing as the disciples of the Tao League. Luckily, they managed to stabilize their bodies and did not fall to the ground. The 16 Tao fusing cultivators took a deep breath at the same time. Immediately, a gust of wind rose in the hall, blowing out through the cracks of the doors and windows. Wherever the gust passed, the shaking palace of Tao Yuan quickly calmed down, and even the faintly trembling human realm beyond heaven calmed down. Sitting cross-legged on a lotus throne, Purple Eyebrows sighed slowly and said, "The movement in the human realm beyond heaven. Is it possible that someone is one step ahead of us?" Buddha Guarding Heart, whose entire body was shrouded in a black and yellow mist, sneered and said, "How could they have such a great fortune? Do they really think that the holy treasure we got is something that anyone can pick up from the ground? They don't have that fortune, and how could they be one step ahead of us?" Purple Eyebrows frowned and said, "Keep working hard. We have been planning for so many years, and it was not easy for us to complete the layout and control the great Tao of Pangu world. If we still can't understand it with the tremendous natural rewards power and the fortune of the humankind, and the power of the great Tao of Pangu world, we will be like those people in the holy realm, unable to escape from the hands of the world destroyer." The 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs sighed at the same time, then closed their eyes and fell into meditation again. There was a faint light coming out from between their eyebrows, illuminating their entire bodies. It was as if their skin was covered by a thin layer of light, and there was light shining from within their bodies through their skin. Countless tiny specks of light gathered from all directions and entered their bodies. As time passed, the light between their eyebrows grew brighter and brighter. The black and yellow mist that enveloped them was the great amount of natural rewards power they had obtained after they merged countless outer heavenly realms with Pangu patriarchs. The golden energy that enveloped them was the tremendous virtues they had obtained after reuniting countless outer heavenly realms with Pangu continent. The black and yellow mist that patriarchs and Tao Yuan patriarchs had Pangu had received Buddha, and had Patra had patriarchs had Qi. Had Yang upon them. Wu Temple beyond sect Yuan Emperor Qi. Yu Divine Yuan Spirit Realm should God Saints Heaven. Now, the Qi of virtue had been divided into 16 portions, and each Buddhist patriarch and Daozu had received an equal share. The power of virtue wrapped around their bodies, and with the support of the power of virtue, their divine sense was 1,000,000 times stronger and sharper than usual. Usually, they could only think about one problem in a snap of a finger, but now, they could deal with 1,000,000 of the same complicated problems in the same amount of time. The Qi of virtue was the fuel that supported the operation of the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs. Above everyone's heads, a huge purple three-dimensional formation was glowing faintly. It was the same formation Wu Qi had seen in the Celestial Court, the giant formation that Tao League and Buddhist League used to control the great Tao of Pangu world. Wisps of mysterious aura were constantly leaking out of it, fusing into the divine souls of the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs. These mysterious auras were the laws of Pangu world, and they were constantly being absorbed by the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs. Their divine senses, which were 1,000,000 times stronger and sharper, were doing their best to analyze these great Taos. Even though the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs were powerful Tao-fusing experts, the great Tao they truly and thoroughly mastered was only a tiny part of the boundless great Tao of Pangu world. If the great Tao mastered by ordinary immortals was a drop of water, they had reached the level of a great lake. However, the great Tao of the entire Pangu world was a boundless ocean. There were things that the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs did not understand, And there were many things that they did not understand. They were mobilizing the power of the Great Tao with the power of the Great Tao, sending the mysteries of the Great Tao into their divine souls for them to analyze. The laws of the Great Tao were originally tangled together in chaos, and even Tao fusing experts could not clearly break them down. But with the divine throne of the three realms, the huge formation built with the power of the divine throne of the Great Tao was like a sieve, clearly breaking down the laws of the Great Tao. Strand after strand of the laws of the Great Tao merged into the divine souls of the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs in an orderly manner, making it much easier for them to analyze. They sat cross-legged on the lotus seats, but the lotus seats were not some primordial supreme treasures, nor were they some spiritual treasures. They were formed entirely from the natural fortune of the humankind. The purple-golden natural fortune of the humankind was the core power of Pangu world, and the humankind was the main character of Pangu world. Lotus thrones condensed from the natural fortune of the humankind stabilized the divine souls of the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs. No matter how much divine power they consumed, no matter how difficult it was for them to study the laws of the Great Tao, their divine souls would not suffer from the backlash of the Great Tao. The immeasurable natural rewards power strengthened their divine sense by 1,000,000 times. The divine throne of the Great Tao allowed them to easily control the Great Tao, and the natural fortune of the humankind protected them from the backlash of the Great Tao. The 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs had been planning for countless years, and this was all they wanted. A mysterious aura spread out from the bodies of the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs. Suddenly, Buddha Garding sighed and said, "Wonderful. I can't believe that the breathing soil contains such a profound secret. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. No wonder Pangu was able to create the world. He obtained such a treasure from the ancient holy palace." Priest White Eyebrows sighed as well. The 10,000 spirit cauldron. The most important thing is that cauldron. Back in the chaos, how much stronger was Pangu's power compared to ours? We could easily defeat him if we joined hands. But the Pangu world he created contains countless mysteries of nature, and this cauldron has indeed contributed a lot. Priest Purple Eyebrows nodded slowly, slightly opened his eyes, and sighed. Indeed. We have been cultivating in seclusion for nearly 100 years, and have seen Pangu's power through a tube. How did he gain so many benefits from the ancient holy palace? If we can understand all these mysteries of nature, we should be able to make further progress, shouldn't we? Buddha Guarding Heart locked his fingers into a lotus shape before his chest. A misty watery wave spread out gently, within which countless faintly visible lights were sparkling. Above the water, countless firefly-like specks of light slowly converged together to form a thread of strange light that was around 10 feet long and as thin as a strand of hair. The light was dim and weak, but it was filled with an indescribable spirit power and life force. The spiritual light seemed to contain countless colors, as well as countless worlds. If one stared at it for a long time, one would have a feeling that one's entire body and soul were about to be sucked into it. Staring at the beam of light, Buddha Guarding Heart murmured in a low voice, "When we understand the great Tao of Pangu world, we will know all the secrets Pangu obtained from the ancient holy palace. Then we can merge with this pre-world spirit, and we will have some hope, right?" The eyes of the other Daozu Buddhas flickered simultaneously as they looked at the beam of light in Buddha Guarding Heart's palms. The 9 Daozu Buddhas straightened their fingers and fingers. A watery wave spread out from their fingertips, and a thin beam of light began flashing on the wave as well. The other 6 Buddhas did the same. They locked their fingers into a lotus shape before their chests, and a watery wave spread out from their palms. 6 thin beams of light floated and danced on the wave, filling the entire hall with the subtle light emitted by the 16 beams of light. When the 16 beams of light appeared, the empty hall was suddenly filled with endless life force and mysteries. Even a random pattern seemed to contain the infinite mysteries of the great Tao. The eyes of the 7 Buddhas and the 9 Taoists flickered, and they sighed at the same time. We were lucky enough to find a remnant of an ancient ocean of spirituality in the chaos, and it happened to give birth to 16 pre-world spirits. Buddha's sentinel sighed. If we can decipher its secrets and merge them, we'll truly be unkillable and invincible. We'll truly transcend mortality and ascend to sainthood. We'll no longer be bound by anything. Not even the battle between Mother and Terminus will be able to affect us. Just as Wu Qi learned from the Seven Holies Palace, a primordial ocean of spirituality was first born in the boundless void in the primordial era. The first batch of spirits were born on the surface of the water, including the spirit of reproduction, which was called Mother by the people of the sacred realm, and the spirit of death and destruction, which was called End. These spirits were truly immortal. Any creation born after the primordial era, as long as it merged with them, would be able to transcend everything and become a true life form of the purest essence. From then on, they would be immortal and indestructible. Even the world-destroying battle between Mother and would not affect the existence of these purest essence life forms. The 7 Buddhas and the 9 Taoists once had hundreds of chaos demon gods who were best friends with them. They went to explore the ancient sacred palace together, but were thrown into a certain primordial relic in the chaos by a restrictive spell. There, they found the remnant of an ancient ocean of spirituality, and there were 16 spirits that had yet to take shape. After a fierce battle, the 7 Buddhas and the 9 Taoists became the final victors, and they divided the 16 spirits among themselves. The aura contained in the 16 spirits was divided into 2 types. The first type was free and unfettered, and there were 9 of them, which led to the creation of the 9 Daozu. The second type was grand and majestic, and there were 7 of them close to the soul, which led to the creation of the 7 Buddhas. This was the origin of the 7 Buddhas and the 9 Taoists. They were originally best friends, but because of the natural closeness and rejection of the spirits they obtained, they were divided into 2 factions. The light of the spirits flashed in the hall, and the 7 Buddhas and the 9 Taoists took the spirits back into their bodies almost at the same time. Purple Eyebrows Daozu said calmly, "Work hard to understand, and success is right in front of you. While the World Breaker has not recovered, while the Heavenly Path deity position can still restrain them, while that old thing Pangu is still hiding, we will definitely succeed." The 7 Buddhas and the 9 Taoists praised in unison. They had worked hard for countless years to plan and even sacrificed countless of their trusted disciples. Finally, they had achieved the battle of God's investiture. How could they not succeed? Once they successfully merged with the spirits, they would no longer be afraid. Chapter 1173. Inside the palace of Tao Origin, the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Tao patriarchs took out the innate spirits they had hidden for countless years and sighed with emotion. Wu Qi, who was walking into the realm beyond heaven with his arm around Greathorns' shoulder, suddenly shuddered. The thieving energy, which had fused perfectly with him, suddenly trembled violently like a greedy cat smelling salted fish. Wu Qi was trembling all over, and he almost lost control of his body. With great difficulty, he turned his head and looked in the direction of the Dalu Ocean. In that direction, there was something that made the thieving energy very excited and impulsive. Wu Qi had a vague feeling that as long as he could get his hands on those things, he would surely get great benefits. There were 16 different auras in total, and they were divided into 2 types. One was ethereal and unpredictable like the footprints of a swan in the snow, and the other was solemn and grand like an ancient bell. There were 9 auras that were as faintly discernible as the clouds and wild cranes, and 7 auras that were dignified and grand, giving off an extremely strong pressure. Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath instinctively. The 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Tao patriarchs were all in the palace of Tao Origin, and they all had good things with them, things that he could not hold back. If it were not for the fact that the current situation did not allow Wu Qi to do that, he would have gone straight to the palace of Tao Origin with his sword and snatched all 16 auras. He vaguely sensed that the 16 auras were similar to the thieving energy he had fused with, and they came from the same source. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi forced himself to turn his head, then patted Greathorns on the shoulder and said with a smile, "How was my heaven-refining cauldron just now?" Wu Qi's question made Huang clan and the others roll their eyes. They could all tell that it was not because Wu Qi had intentionally made the cauldron so huge, but because its power had become so strong that Wu Qi could not control it and could only keep it at this size. Even with Wu Qi's strength, he was unable to control his natal numinous treasure. This was a joke. How could there be a chaos fiend celestial who could not control their own natal numinous treasure? This was something that was produced when the chaos demon god was born. It was basically a part of his body, just like the fingers on his arm. He should have been able to control it when he was born. However, Wu Qi's heaven refining cauldron had indeed undergone such a strange change. This could only prove one thing. Wu Qi had encountered some kind of incredible fortuitous encounter, which greatly enhanced the power of the heaven refining cauldron. It was so strong that even with Wu Qi's strength, he could not control it well. The terrifying power that erupted from the heaven refining cauldron just now shocked everyone. The milky white Yuan Ling true flame contained a terrifyingly high temperature. Even Huang clan and the others sensed that the flame was strong enough to threaten their lives. Even though their natal numinous treasures, Yuan Ling, had merged with the great Tao of Panga world, and as long as the great Tao existed, Yuan Ling would not perish, the white flame could definitely destroy their bodies and souls, leaving only their natal numinous treasures, struggling at death's door. How on earth did Wu Qi achieve such a terrifying power? However, because Wu Qi had shown such a terrifying power, the treatment Wu Qi received in the Empress Hua Palace was completely different from the previous 2 times. While Huang clan was not a powerful person, but her attitude toward Wu Qi was indeed much more polite this time. Wu Qi was already an expert who could be mentioned in the same breath as her, and experts should receive the respect they deserved. The group sat in the main hall of the Empress Hua Palace. While Huang clan sat in the middle, and on her left and right were Yellow Emperor Xinyuan and Yen Emperor Shenong. The 6 holy emperors sat cross-legged beside the 3 of them. On the left side of Huang clan was Wu Qi, and on the right side were 18 Holy Alliance Tao fusing experts. The maids of the Empress Hua Palace served top-grade fragrant tea and countless immortal fruits. With Huang clan's attentive persuasion, Wu Qi drank 3 cups of tea and ate a few pieces of lotus root. Then, everyone's expression became serious. It was time to get down to business. At their level of cultivation base, it was necessary to pave the way with polite words. "Old friend Yuan Ling, what brings you here?" Huang clan looked at Wu Qi with a faint smile, twitched her lips slightly, and pointed at the entrance of the heavens beyond heaven. "Old friend, how could you come knocking on our door? You must know that it took us months to lay out the restrictive spell in front of the door, and now it's all destroyed." Great Horns nodded repeatedly. He stamped his foot and pointed at Wu Qi as he cried out, "You're so rude, old monster. Lao Tzu has sweated a few times for the sake of that restrictive spell. TSK, Lao Tzu doesn't know those advanced restrictive spells, so he's only responsible for providing magic power. In fact, Lao Tzu has been drained several times for the sake of this restrictive spell." Wu Qi could not help but roll his eyes. As a mighty Tao-fusing saint, his divine abilities and magic power could be generated at will, and as long as the natural energy was not depleted, his magic power could be replenished at any time. Even so, Great Horns had been drained several times. It was obvious that the restrictive spell had taken too much effort from everyone present. However, Wu Qi had attacked the strongest and also the weakest part of the restrictive spell with the mystic art he had comprehended from the 7 Holiness Palace, using the most fundamental rune source power to break it. Even though the restrictive spell had been laid out by everyone together, it was broken with just one swing of the axe. Huang clan looked at Wu Qi with a smile and nodded slowly. It seems that old friend Yuan Ling must have had a fortuitous encounter. Otherwise, how could the heaven refining cauldron have become like that? And with old friend Yuan Ling's original strength. Old friend Yuan Ling has not fused with the Tao, has he? Wu Qi nodded and said with a smile, "Indeed, he has not fused with the Tao. But Empress Hua should know that fusing with the Tao is not the only choice among the myriad great Taos." Everyone fell silent at the same time. Then, Huang clan said with a smile, "So, Old friend Yuan Ling has gone to the ancient sacred palace after all these years? Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, that place used to be called the Seven Holiness Palace. The great hall fell into a dead silence. Wang Clan narrowed her eyes thoughtfully and said, so, the ancient sacred palace is called the Seven Holiness Palace? Seven Holiness. It must be the palace left behind by the seven strongest saints in the sacred world, right? When Pangu ventured in, he only obtained a few treasures and a few ancient scrolls, but he had never even heard of the name of the Seven Holiness Palace. Huang Clan's meaning was clear. When Pangu entered the Seven Holiness Palace, he only obtained a few worldly possessions, but in the end he created the Pangu world. Wu Qi went in and he learned the name of the Seven Holiness Palace. Obviously, he obtained a lot of benefits there. At least, he obtained more than what Pangu obtained. Huang Clan asked, you, Wu Qi, have obtained so many benefits. Why did you come to Empress Wa's palace? Pointing at the small table next to him, Wu Qi frowned and said, Yuan Ling understands what Empress Wa means. According to common sense, if the original spirit received such a big benefit, it should have taken its family, friends, and students somewhere else. At the very least, it would have been able to avoid the Breakworld people. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi shook his head and said, but Yuan Ling was muddle-headed in the chaos in his previous life, and there was nothing unforgettable. Only in this life, he has experienced the feelings of gratitude, hatred, love, and hatred, and so on. I can't let it go. Pointing a finger out of the hall, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, when I get rid of the Breakworld people, I will force the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Tao patriarchs to turn the mortal world into nothingness. All the people of the human race will live on Pangu continent with dignity, instead of living like livestock in a pen like they are now. Huang Clan's eyes lit up. She smiled and nodded. Even without Wu Qi's words, she would do the same if she was strong enough. After pondering for a while, Wu Qi looked at the 6 saint emperors sitting behind Huang Clan and smiled a little embarrassedly. All the women of the 6 dynasties were his wives and concubines, and in a sense, the 6 saint emperors were his fathers-in-law. How could he not feel embarrassed? Laughing strangely, Wu Qi turned to Huang Clan and said, during the battle in front of Empress Wa's palace, Yuan Ling was watching from the sidelines. I suppose these 6 saint emperors are the reincarnations of old friends from the chaos? That's right, Huang Clan said with a smile. Not only the 6 of them, but also, waving his hand, Wu Qi shook his head and said, I don't care how many people there are, and who they are the reincarnations of. I only care about one thing. The 6 saint emperors are matched with the 6 great celestial emperors, and their subjects are matched with the righteous gods and important immortal officials of the celestial court. Empress Wa, I want to borrow the 6 saint emperors and their subjects. The celestial court has 6 great celestial emperors, as well as the righteous gods and immortal monarchs of various directions. You can lend me as many people as you like. Huang Clan was taken aback. When Wu Qi wanted to borrow people from her, she thought that Wu Qi was going to fight with the celestial court. But judging from the number of people he had prepared, it seemed that it was more than that. She suddenly realized that she could no longer see through Wu Qi. Whether it was in terms of cultivation base or other aspects, she had no idea what Wu Qi was planning to do. After pondering for a moment, Huang Clan did not say a word. After a while, Wu Qi shook his head smilingly and said, Don't worry, Empress Wa. I won't fall out with the celestial court. I just want to borrow some things from them. To be frank, Wu Qi did not finish his words. Instead, he transmitted his words to Huang Clan through his divine sense. Huang Clan's beautiful eyes flickered, and the gleam in them grew brighter and brighter. In the end, she burst out laughing. Nodding her head, she said with a smile, Are you fully confident? Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and smiled, but did not say a word, as if he had a well-thought-out plan. Huang Clan turned to Yan Dan and said, This son-in-law of yours, our old friend Yuan Ling, has come to us with gifts. Gather your subordinates and follow him. This time, you have gained a lot of benefits, but some people are going to vomit blood because of anger. If he really succeeds, Wawang Clan's eyes narrowed into crescent moons as she laughed happily. She glanced thoughtfully in the direction of the Daluotian army and kept giggling. Great Horns and the others, on the other hand, were confused. They had no idea what Wu Qi had said to Wawang Clan. But Wu Qi had only told Wawang Clan about it through his divine sense, which made it clear that he did not want anyone else to know about it. Even though Great Horns was so curious that his heart was scratching like countless mice, he could do nothing to Wu Qi. Wu Qi's current cultivation base was unfathomable. Even if Great Horns wanted to interrogate Wu Qi with his fists, he was no match for Wu Qi. Before long, the emperors of the 6 states led a group of civil and military officials and a large number of soldiers out of the heavenly beyond heaven in a mighty array. The ceremonial procession of the 6 states was spread out, and the huge army stretched for nearly 10,000 miles in the void. Wu Qi led the army toward the celestial court, and when he entered the South Heaven Gate, he gave the Daluotian a fierce look. He had to get his hands on those 16 auras. Every cell in Wu Qi's body was trembling violently, and he could not wait to devour them. Chapter 1174. Outside the Southern Heaven Gate, the 8 heavenly kings who guarded the gate immediately turned around when they saw Wu Qi. All the celestial soldiers and generals who guarded the gate obediently retreated to both sides, and no one gave Wu Qi a second glance. No one even asked where the mighty army behind Wu Qi came from. The murderous aura of the tens of millions of elites of the 6 states was towering, but the celestial soldiers and generals did not utter a word. From the time the Southern Heaven Gate was closed and not allowing Wu Qi to enter, to today, when Wu Qi brought his men in and out without saying a word, the attitude of the 8 heavenly kings toward Wu Qi had undergone a 180-degree change, just like the attitude of the celestial court toward Wu Qi. No matter what Wu Qi did, he could not destroy the celestial court, could he? As long as he could risk his life to fight the world destroyer, who would care what he did? Like a black dragon, the army rushed from the Taihuang Huangzhengtian straight into the 3 pure heavens, roaring the battle hymn of the 6 states all the way into esteemed Shouju's palace. Ao Buzan and Lord Xianxing came out to greet them, then assigned immortal officials to assign tents to the soldiers of the 6 states. Soon, tens of millions of soldiers had set up tents. With the addition of tens of millions of elites, the murderous aura in esteemed Shouju's palace soared into the sky, attracting the attention of all the immortals near and far. But, since the 6 celestial emperors did not say anything, who dared to say a word to Wu Qi at this critical juncture? Celestial Lord Tianyuan and Goddess Long Yi had been beaten into a sorry state by Wu Qi. Which other immortal dared to say that they had a greater reputation and a stronger backing than them? The cheers of the soldiers could be heard everywhere. Among the tens of thousands of elites of the 6 states brought by Wu Qi, there were also some divine soldiers and generals under the command of the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan and the Yen Emperor Shennong. It was the first time for the soldiers under the command of the 2 divine emperors to set foot in the celestial court, and it was also the first time for the forces of the human race to set foot in the territory of the celestial court. Therefore, the soldiers were overjoyed and cheered at the top of their lungs, making the ground shake. Wu Qi abandoned these soldiers and led the emperors of the 6 states and nearly 100 of his trusted ministers into an underground secret hall. Inside the spacious secret palace, the floor was paved with lustrous purple turbid crystals. This was a special material produced in the most chaotic and violent region of the chaos. This thing didn't have any other uses, but it was a supreme treasure that could isolate the probing of divine sense. The purple crystals were mixed with violent and chaotic spirit qi, and any divine sense that entered the crystals would be greatly weakened. A centimeter-thick lustrous purple turbid crystal could isolate the probing of a peak-level heaven immortal, an inch-thick crystal could prevent a gold immortal from peeping, a foot-thick crystal could make a primordial immortal sigh, and a 3-foot-thick crystal could prevent the divine sense of a Tao-breaking expert from breaking through the barrier. However, Wu Qi had laid 100 miles thick layer of lustrous purple turbid crystals around the underground secret palace. Even a Tao fusing expert could not break through such a thick barrier with his divine sense. Moreover, Wu Qi had set up a large number of runes and restrictive spells from the Seven Holiness Palace, so he was not afraid that someone could eavesdrop on their conversation. Together with Princess Zhonglu and Yi Xia, Wu Qi and the others took their seats in the Great Hall. The nominal master of this palace city, Shou Zhuoshangren, was like a servant, working hard to boil tea at the side and attentively filling teacups for everyone who attended the meeting. He was just a clone of Wu Qi, and all the emperors of the 6 dynasties and their courtiers had daughters who were married to Wu Qi. Therefore, the hundreds of people who entered the secret palace were considered Wu Qi's father-in-law, so it was only natural that esteemed Shou Zhuo worked hard to prepare the tea. After all, he couldn't just disregard his in-laws just because he had been conferred the title of Celestial Emperor, could he? Sitting down comfortably with his legs crossed, Wu Qi did not say anything. A ball of Yuanling true flame shot out from between his eyebrows, and a milky white formation slowly drifted out of the flame. Looking at the emperors and courtiers of the 6 dynasties in front of him, he said with a smile, "These years, I've been to the chaos and luckily obtained a holy artifact called Spirit Gathering. It's a wonderful holy artifact that can gather and extract the Holy Spirit aura between heaven and earth and transform it into holy power." The emperors and courtiers of the 6 dynasties were puzzled. They had no idea what a holy artifact was, let alone what Holy Spirit aura and holy power were. Looking at their confused faces, Wu Qi had no choice but to explain to them the origin of the holy realm, making them understand that the Holy Spirit aura was equivalent to the natural energy of Pangu world, and the holy power was equivalent to the immortal energy cultivated by the immortals of Pangu world. It was nothing more than that the Holy Spirit aura was much higher than the natural energy, and the holy power was countless times more powerful and magical than the immortal energy. The formation hovering in front of Wu Qi was crafted with that holy artifact. At the moment when great celestial Emperor Yuan Yen wielded the whip to attack the 1,000 heads, Wu Qi saw the huge heavenly divinity formation between heaven and earth. The formation he crafted was finally completed. The magic circle that looked like a pot lid was thickly dotted with complicated patterns. Between the twisted runes and patterns, there were 6 relatively large clusters of light flashing. Then, tens of millions of tiny light clusters surrounded the 6 relatively large clusters of light. If one took a closer look, one would find that most of these tiny lights corresponded to the stars in the sky, while the rest corresponded to the positions of the various divine positions on the heavenly divinity formation. This thing is marvelous. When Gigazi and Mod, who were sitting in the secret palace together, saw the formation that was flashing with white spiritual light, their eyes widened like a bloodthirsty lion that had seen a delicious antelope. Both of them leaned over with their eyes wide open. The formation responded to the heavenly Tao and was connected to the earthly Qi. It contained infinite mysteries, as if all the mysteries of the whole world were completely contained in it. It was just that although the formation was glowing brightly, it seemed to have a form but no soul, and had no vitality. This was just a blank array diagram, and the flashing lights were the vital points of the array core. The array core lacked a core to suppress the array, so the entire array diagram was lifeless. It was not exactly lifeless. The entire formation was constantly absorbing some kind of mystical power from the void. If one were to look at the edge of the formation from the side, they would see countless tiny light spots slowly fusing into the formation. Moreover, whenever Wu Qi pointed at the formation, the surrounding void would tremble, as if any movement of the formation would trigger the response of the power of heaven and earth. Everyone was staring at Wu Qi in silence, their eyes darting over to the formation from time to time. Even Princess Zhonglu and Yi Xia had no idea when Wu Qi made this thing. Did he have the time and energy to craft it when he was in the 7 Sacred Palace? If he did not craft it when he was in the 7 Sacred Palace, when did he come up with this idea? Gently stroking the formation, Wu Qi said coolly, "I call this treasure the Heaven Pilfering Formation." As the name suggests, the only function of this formation is to seize the control of the heaven and earth from the hands of those gods conferred by Buddha and Daozu. The crowd was struck dumb with amazement, and they could not help but cry out in unison. "How is that possible?" cried Ing Zheng. All the gods conferred by the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Tao patriarchs are created by the heavenly Tao. Now, those gods have fused with the heavenly Tao, which means they are existences of Tao fusing realm in another sense. How are you going to steal the control of the heavenly Tao from them? That is completely impossible. Wu Qi just narrowed his eyes and smiled. The thieving energy was a magical power, and there was nothing under the heaven that it could not get its hands on. It did not matter if it was tangible or intangible, as long as it existed, Wu Qi could always steal it away with the scroll of stealing. After the trial in the 7 Sacred Palace, the thieving energy had fused perfectly with Wu Qi, and Wu Qi had mastered the scroll of stealing and reached a whole new realm. Wu Qi had even changed the name of the scroll of stealing. Now, he called it the scroll of stealing. Even if it were those existences who had transcended the mortal realm, as long as they were targeted by Wu Qi, they would have to obediently be stripped naked. Smiling, Wu Qi gave the crowd a glance, then nodded at Yen Dan and said, "Your Majesty, please donate a drop of your blood essence." Yen Dan hesitated for a brief moment, then smiled and shook his head, then nodded and said, "All right, let's see what you can do." He stuck out a small part of his tongue, and a slit opened up on the tip of his tongue. A drop of prime blood essence, about the size of a soybean and shrouded in roiling purple mist, slowly oozed out from the slit and flew towards Wu Qi at lightning speed. Carefully, Wu Qi caught the tiny drop of blood essence with both hands, then quickly drew 9 runes in the air. Slowly, the purple drop of blood essence was compressed to the size of a sesame seed, emitting a dazzling gleam that no one could look directly at. One of the 6 largest light spots on the sky-stealing formation suddenly sparkled. Wu Qi threw the drop of blood essence into it. The surrounding air vibrated, and the drop of blood essence merged with the light spot. Pressing his hands on the formation, Wu Qi silently activated the mystic technique of thieving he learned from the scroll of stealing. Through the formation, a thread of his spirit power gradually connected with the surrounding natural powers. All of a sudden, a dazzling light flashed across the formation, and the crowd felt their bodies lightened, as if they had arrived in the boundless starry sky. Above their heads was an enormous formation that covered the entire Pangu world, while in front of them was a 300 meters wide, sparkling, sky-stealing great formation. The structure of the 2 formations was exactly the same. Controlled by Wu Qi, the power released from the sky-stealing Great Formation gradually merged with the Great Formation of the Great Tao of Nature. Yen Dan, who was sitting motionless in the distance, suddenly had a wonderful feeling. It was as if there was a mysterious power in his body. He faintly felt that as long as he had this power in his hands, he would be able to command the entire universe and no one would dare to disobey him. Invisible strands of power of great Tao surged into Yen Dan's body, flushing his limbs and bones, and purifying his soul. Yen Dan felt as if his whole body was floating in the air, and the incomparably beautiful pleasure almost made him sing out loud. His eyes glowed with an incomparably majestic pure golden light. That was a divine light that only belonged to a supreme being who ruled over all living beings. Great! My guess was right. Wu Qi laughed and said, "I can indeed communicate with the great formation of the great Tao of nature with the sky-stealing great formation, steal the divine power from it, and give it to others. Now I'm only taking a part of the divine power. When everything is ready, I'll directly deprive Yuan Yen and the others of their divine thrones, and take all their divine positions. By then, whether their souls perish or not, I won't be able to care." Wu Qi's words stunned Yen Dan. Next, Yen Dan burst into a rage and threw a flying kick towards Wu Qi. "Bastard! Are you using me as an experiment? What if it doesn't work? What if you can't draw the divine power from a divine emperor?" Yen Dan was enraged. Wu Qi was using him as an experiment subject to try out this illusory formation of the great Tao of nature. This was something that the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and 9 Tao patriarchs had planned for countless years, and Wu Qi was using him as an experiment subject. Princess Zhonglu jumped up in a hurry. She glared at Yen Dan and said angrily, "Grandpa Emperor, aren't you just being used as an experiment subject? You haven't even lost a strand of your hair, and you've gained such a great benefit. If you don't give Wu Qi something good, you still want to beat him up? What kind of logic is this? Princess Zhangli intervened, and Yen Dan was so angry that he couldn't make a sound. Chi-Chi shook his head at the people in the hall. This was the so-called girl who was more outgoing. But soon, everyone looked at the great formation with fanatical eyes. This damn thing could really steal divine power from a divine position. Chapter 1175. In the Dingyu city, in the southern region of Panga continent, huge black flags fluttered wildly in the wind. The silver threads formed a huge U character on the flag. The flagpoles, each 1,000 feet tall and forged with the finest metals, were extremely heavy. Fan Kuai and 99 burly men, each holding a flagpole, stood firmly in front of the army. A gust of strong wind blew past, and hundreds of flags fluttered in the wind, producing loud noises. 30 phalanxes of Chi-Chi's soldiers stood on the plain, emanating an evil aura that did not belong to human beings. Standing on the parade platform, Liu Bang could not help but sigh faintly as he looked down at the menacing soldiers. He reached out and touched his chest. A fiend light flashed across his heart, and a heart-wrenching pain made Liu Bang's body twitch violently. He frowned, looked up at the sky, and sighed. Feebly, he took a few steps forward and mobilized the soldiers before they left for the war. In fact, these soldiers did not need any mobilization, for they had lost the intelligence that human beings should have. Just a few days ago, they were still ordinary mortals. They were just the most ordinary farmers in the most remote county of the southern border. They were either herding livestock or plowing the fields. They had lived here for generations, and even the conferred god war had not affected them. But a few days later, they had become elite and valiant warriors, and everything about them had changed, both their bodies and their souls. All the soldiers were about 15 feet tall, and their skin was a faint bluish-black. Underneath their seemingly thin, almost transparent skin were knotted purple-black muscles, which bulged and intertwined with each other like venomous pythons and gave off a menacing aura that made one shudder. Their bodies swelled as if they had exploded, filled with an indescribable sense of power. Their faces were contorted, and when they grinned, they revealed sharp, triangular-shaped teeth that were as dense as a shark's. Saliva slid out of their mouths from time to time, and the sticky saliva gave off a strong smell of blood. Every soldier was wearing heavy armor, and they were all magus armors made by the forbidden race with extremely brilliant methods. Unlike the immortal armors commonly used by immortals, these armors did not need to be powered by any force, and they could not be burned by fire or soaked by water. Not only could they fly in the sky, burrow into the ground, and climb over mountains as if they were flat ground, but they could also increase the wearer's strength by 100 times. Although these magic armors were made from metal, some special body cells were mixed in the metal, which made the metal as active as the muscles and muscles. Countless hair-thin tentacles stretched out of every part of the armor, all of which sank deep into the soldiers' bodies, absorbing their life force to replenish the armor. At the same time, if a soldier could kill an enemy, the armor would also extract the enemy's life force to replenish itself and the soldier wearing the armor, making them stronger and stronger as they fought. The divine souls of all the soldiers were destroyed by the forbidden clans with secret medicines. Now, these soldiers only retained the most basic biological instincts. They only obeyed Liu Bang's orders. If Liu Bang wanted them to live, they would live. If he wanted them to die, they would kill themselves immediately, and if he wanted them to kill, they would kill all the living beings in front of them. This was an army of forbidden clans built by Wu Xian. After being instilled with all kinds of secret medicines, these soldiers had a cultivation base of at least the 9 stars realm in the second Panga heaven. Although their life force was greatly damaged when they were fighting, as long as they killed more enemies and replenished themselves with more blood essence, they would grow stronger and stronger, and the loss of life force would be replenished as soon as possible. Listlessly and tastelessly, Liu Bang shook his sleeves and walked down the platform listlessly. Even he himself did not believe what he had just said. Moreover, his target was 300,000 monsters who had already lost their minds and only knew how to kill. He felt that these words were the most boring words he had ever said in his countless reincarnations and countless lives. A total of 100 banners were raised high, and Lu Bang's voice rang through the entire plain. Following his order, 29 generals led 5,000 soldiers and marched toward the northwest and northeast like 29 vipers. Behind these 29 armies were members of the forbidden clans, who were secretly following and helping them. Meanwhile, Lu Bang, together with Han Xian, Zhang Liang, and a few other loyal subordinates, led the main force of more than 150,000 soldiers to attack Hao Province, an 8th-grade province in the north. Although Hao Province was only an 8th-grade province, it had been developing for many years. Although it was not very developed in terms of production and economy, it had a large population of nearly 80 million people. If he could capture the whole province and use the mystic arts of the forbidden clans, he could arm at least 20 million of them, who were fearless of life and death and had infinite fighting strength. A strange black horse with 4 eyes and 6 hooves galloped over gracefully on a flaming cloud and stopped in front of Lu Bang. It was a monster created by the forbidden clans, and its name was 10,000 miles wind-treading beast. It was so fast that it was comparable to the escape light of an ordinary gold immortal. Moreover, it was proficient in all kinds of escape arts, so it could pass through mountains, seas, and boundless magma safely. Apart from being a little ugly, the 1,000-mile wind-treading beast was an excellent mount. Lu Bang mounted the horse, pulled out his sword, and was about to order the army to march out when Lu Buwei, who had been standing behind him, suddenly stepped forward and grabbed Lu Bang's sleeve. Lu Buwei stared at Lu Bang with a solemn face, lowered his voice, and bellowed, "Lu Bang, are you really going to do as they say? This is a matter that defies all human relations." Lu Bang stared at Lu Buwei with a gloomy face, stooped down, and cried out in a low voice, Lao Tzu has a conscience. But in this situation, apart from doing as they say, what other way can Lao Tzu do? Aren't you the Prime Minister of Daqin, Lu Buwei? Aren't you an expert in all kinds of plots and intrigues? If you have the guts, why don't you beat them down? Lu Buwei stared at Lu Bang in a daze. Suddenly, he became listless, like a deflated balloon. Slowly, he loosened Lu Bang's sleeve and murmured in a low voice, "I've been scheming all my life, but I've never thought about doing something like this. If I had known this would happen, I would rather have joined Wu Qi's side. Why would I want to hang around with a bastard like you?" Lu Bang threw a cold glance at Lu Buwei, then rubbed his own chest. Another beam of evil light flashed across his chest. Lu Bang's body twitched, then he gnashed his teeth and pulled out his sword, swung it forward and growled, "Let's go. Advance with all our strength. Wherever we go, don't leave even a chicken or a dog alive." With a cracking sound, 3 of Lu Bang's teeth were broken, and blood slowly trickled down the corner of his mouth. Lu Buwei heaved a long sigh and rubbed his own chest. A beam of evil light also flashed across his chest, and his body began to twitch violently. With a wry smile, Lu Buwei looked at Wu Xian, who was walking slowly towards him with 2 beautiful girls in his arms. "You evildoers," he cursed in a low voice. "You will surely die a graveless death." Stamping his foot fiercely, 5 ghosts suddenly appeared around Lu Buwei. His body transformed into a gust of chilly wind, and with a strange laugh, he soared into the sky and sped straight to the north. With 2 pale and dying girls in his arms, he walked slowly to Lu Bang's side. Wu Xian looked at the army marching northward and laughed triumphantly. Then, he raised his chin, glanced in the direction from which Lu Buwei had flown, and asked with a smile, "What is that old man doing?" "He is the vanguard of the main SEAL army," Lu Bang said without batting an eyelid. "Naturally, he is going to the outpost to scout. With the 5 ghosts escape art protecting him, few people in the world can see through his tracks. Isn't he the best candidate for scout?" Wu Xian shook his head disapprovingly and said with a sneer, "Why do we need scouts? Wherever this army passes, no one can stop them, so why do we need scouts? Hurry up and set off." Remember, wherever you go, don't leave even a chicken or a dog alive. Kill all living beings, leave those young and strong men to take the secret medicine, and kill all the others. Liu Bang tightened his grip on his sword, gritted his teeth, and said, I know. But, if I kill these people, where will the people under my rule come from in the future? Wu Xian glared at Liu Bang. A flame flickered on his chest, and he fell off the horse with a miserable howl. He fell to the ground and twitched all over, unable to move for a long time. Wu Xian laughed in a strange voice and said, Don't get me wrong, Liu Bang, your majesty. Now is not the time when you threaten me, but the time when I'm threatening you. Just do your job obediently. As for other things, don't think too much about them, or you'll die. Laughing strangely, Wu Xian said in a gloomy voice, The human race enjoys the fortune of heaven and earth alone? Hee, if the human race is destroyed, then so be it. Since the forbidden race has occupied the fortune of the human race, we will certainly prosper, and I, Wu Xian, will be the new ancestor of the human race. With a gentle clench of his fist, the two beautiful girls beside him suddenly howled miserably. The little remaining energy essence in their bodies was sucked dry by Wu Xian, and in the blink of an eye, they had turned into two dried corpses and fallen to the ground. Wu Xian roared with laughter at the top of his lungs, then stomped hard on Liu Bang's head and rubbed his foot against the sole of his foot. With a gloomy face, Liu Bang struggled to his feet. Without even looking at Wu Xian, he leaped onto his mount and led the army forward. Fan Kuai, who was holding the flag, had already drawn his halberd and was ready to fight Wu Xian, but Liu Bang stopped him with a look. The divine souls of Liu Bang and all his subjects had been imprisoned by Huan Yan with a restrictive spell, and now the spell was in Wu Xian's hands. If they fell out with him, Liu Bang and the others would all have their souls destroyed. The army rolled forward, and in just a few days, they had rushed into Hao Province. Hanjiang City, the southernmost city in Hao Province, had only resisted Liu Bang's army for less than a quarter of an hour before it was captured. Before long, flames rose from all over the city, and black smoke rose into the sky. All the old, weak, women and children in the city were killed, leaving less than 100,000 young men who were forced to drink secret medicines. Shrill cries rose into the sky as all the young men's minds were destroyed, turning them into elite warriors who only had the instinct to kill left in them. The people of the forbidden clans helped them put on Magus armors, and Liu Bang's army immediately expanded to 250,000 men. Half a month later, Liu Bang had conquered all 33 cities in Hao Province, and his puppet army had soared to 6,500,000 men. Wherever he passed, all living beings except the young men were wiped out, and even the earthworms, snakes, and rats were dug out and killed. None of the city gods of the 33 cities, nor the mountain gods of the nearby mountains, warned the celestial court. All the gods remained strangely silent, letting Liu Bang's army wreak havoc in Hao Province. Chapter 1176. To the west of the three pure heavens, there was a mountain range entirely made of grand white gold. The mountain stretched for 30,000 miles, and the main peak was about 50 miles tall. The mountain was heavily guarded. Among the 1,080,000 celestial lords conferred by the heavenly courts, 30,000 of them led their celestial soldiers and were stationed here. Each celestial lord had as many as 100 or 80 celestial soldiers, and as few as 3 to 5 celestial soldiers, but each of them was an absolute elite. The difference between ordinary celestial soldiers and celestial generals and celestial soldiers was like the difference between a python and a dragon. If any celestial soldier was placed in the ordinary celestial soldiers of the celestial court, he would at least be at the level of a general who commanded an army of 1,000,000 soldiers. In addition to the huge and elite garrison, the nameless mountain was densely surrounded by countless restrictive formations. At the heart of all the formations was the Yin and Yang Divine Oracle Formation, which Zi Mei Daozu had personally worked on many years ago. Apart from the Divine Mausoleum Formation that enveloped the entire nameless mountain range, there were at least 108,000 formations that were connected to each other in the surroundings of the mountain range. Unlike ordinary formations, which only focused on the outside and not the inside, All the formations here focused 70% of their power on the inside and 30% on the outside. Moreover, the stars in the universe constantly split off a part of their power to shine here. The gravity in the mountain range was more than 1,000,000 times the normal gravity on Pangu continent, so even a gold immortal who specialized in body cultivation could only walk slowly like an ordinary person. At the heart of the mountain range was a great hall that measured several acres in circumference, in which 36 celestial lords were on duty at any time. In the center of the great hall was a huge pit that plunged vertically downwards. Dense, grand white energy essence kept pouring out of the pit, transforming into countless shadows of blades, spears, swords, and halberds that flew and stabbed randomly in the hall, producing ear-piercing clangs from time to time. Walking down this huge pit for 100 miles, Ji Hao came face to face with a square that was about a mile in circumference. A pitch-black gate stood in the middle of the square, and on top of the gate hung a plaque, which read, "Heavenly Dungeon," in blood-red letters. The word, "Heavenly Dungeon," was written on it. This was the Celestial Prison, the most heavily guarded cage in the Celestial Court. Ever since the establishment of the Celestial Court, this celestial prison had always existed, and the first thing the successive celestial emperors did after ascending to the throne was to strengthen the celestial prison's defensive restrictions. As a result, the prison of the Celestial Court had become a place where escape was almost impossible. Even the warden on duty could not answer the question of how many people were imprisoned in the huge prison. In any case, this place was densely packed with cells, and basically every cell was filled with prisoners. Some of the prisoners here had amazing cultivation, but some were no different from mortals. Most of the time, even the prison guards didn't know why they were sent here. But since they were already in the heavenly prison, it was basically impossible for them to leave. Before he became a god, the great celestial emperor Ziwei Linging had sent thousands of unlucky people to the dungeon in a month. That was when Wu Qi killed Zhang Tingyun and sent him to the list of investiture of the gods. The great celestial emperor Ziwei Linging flew into a rage because of Zhang Tingyun's death, and even the fairies who made the slightest noise when they were cleaning were sent here. Most of the others were just like fish in a pond. No matter why the people were sent here, they basically could not get out once they were here. Since ancient times, there had never been a prisoner escaping from the celestial prison of the Celestial Court. The big shots of the Celestial Court who sent them here would soon forget about their existence, and their relatives and friends would not be able to break through the restrictive spells on the periphery, especially when Daozu himself set up a formation to break in and rescue them. It was not easy for the prisoners who were suppressed by the restrictive spells to keep their lives, so how could they escape from here? The whole celestial prison was shaped like a beehive, and the prisoners on the top few floors had the weakest strength, so they were locked up there. The lower they went, the more astonishing the number of prisoners. For example, nearly 100 primordial immortals of the realm of Tao reasoning were locked up in the 340th floor of the celestial prison from the bottom of the 360 floors. As for who was locked up in the celestial prison below the 340th floor, 99% of the jailers had no idea. They would not inquire about such gossip, and they did not have the courage to do so. After all, even primordial immortals could only be locked up in the 340th floor. Just thinking about what kind of people were locked up in the lower floors sent chills down their spines. But very few people knew that there was actually another floor below the 360th floor of the celestial prison. It was a solitary cell, about 100 miles in both width and length, inlaid with a few dragon pearls of hornless dragons. Someone had deliberately extracted more than half of the energy essence in the dragon pearls, and the rest of the energy essence could only make them emit a very faint glow, barely enough to make the cell not so dark that one could not even see their own fingers. More than 100 pitch-black pillars stood erect in the cell, each of which was carved with countless faces of ghosts and deities, twisting and twitching from time to time as if they were alive. The eyes of these faces flickered with a bright light, and the occasional chirping could be heard coming out of them. Strange black ropes as thick as thumbs stretched out of the mouths of these faces, tying some hazy figures tightly to the pillars. These ropes, which looked like human tendons and muscles, were made of a strange material and plunged deep into the bodies of these figures, drilling into their limbs and all their vital acupoints, and then coming out of the corresponding acupoints. The ropes were clearly tied very tightly, and sometimes the creaking sound of the ropes could be heard when they were pulled taut. Occasionally, a few figures could be heard cursing in a deep voice. Clearly they were still alive. Countless extremely dim stars flickered on the ceiling of the cell, which was the projection of the star power that shone into the cell. The maximum gravity in the cell above was only 1,000,000 times the normal gravity on Panga continent, but the star power here was so strong that the gravity brought about by the star pressure was at least 10 billion times the normal gravity. With such a terrible gravity, even a primordial immortal weapon would be unable to move. But these prisoners could still speak, which showed how strong they were. There were a total of 135 stakes, and 133 of them were tied to indistinct human figures. The remaining 2 pillars were tied to 2 crystals that looked like ice cubes. The dense ropes tightly bound the 2 crystals. The ropes pierced through the crystals and into the bodies of the 2 people inside, piercing through all the vital acupoints and joints of their limbs. Sha Tu and Yang Shao, the 2 unlucky fellows who were captured alive by Wu Qi, were imprisoned here. They had already woken up. The 2 of them opened their eyes wide in the crystal and were looking at their surroundings while mumbling something. But these crystals were condensed by Wu Qi with the sacred runes of the 7 Holiness Palace, so they could not move at all. Coupled with the strange ropes, they could only stay in the 2 crystals. All of a sudden, the ceiling in one corner of the cell moved away silently, and a skinny figure gleaming with a purple light darted in. He had a pointy mouth and a thin layer of white hair all over his body, making him look like a white monkey. But the immortal official's robe he was wearing revealed his identity. He was one of the 12 jailers of the celestial prison. The jailers of the celestial prison rotated according to the heavenly stems and earthly branches, and this year, it was the jailer's turn to be on duty. The monkey jumped into the cell, ignoring the terrible gravity that was 10 billion times stronger than the normal gravity, and swaggered to the center of the cell. He looked around, sighed heavily, and then shouted, "Listen up, everyone. Although I have to waste time asking you once a month, this is an order from my superiors, so I can only ask you one more time. Whoever is willing to submit to the celestial court can leave this place and enjoy life as much as you want." The captives atop the 133 stakes all laughed coldly in unison. They all let out strange laughs, and some of them began to curse loudly, starting with Tao Father Violet Brow and continuing to curse the descendants of the mounts that the celestial court had raised. The monkey shrugged helplessly, grumbled for a while, then transformed into a purple cloud and flew toward the entrance. Yang Shao, who was imprisoned in the crystal, suddenly laughed and shouted, "Hey, old monkey, listen to me. Give me 100 beautiful fairies, all pure virgins, and make me feel comfortable, and I'll submit to the celestial court. If your Sky King can let me be the manager of all the fairies in the celestial court, I can do anything for your celestial court." The cell suddenly became quiet. The monkey, who had transformed into a purple cloud, nearly bumped his head against the wall. The monkey turned around angrily and glared at Yang Xian. He shouted, "Shut up your mother's bullshit. All the other people in this cell can submit, but you too can keep dreaming. You can only be imprisoned here for the rest of your lives. You world breakers submit to the celestial court? You are willing to do that, but we dare not." Yang Xian grumbled. He slightly twisted his neck, and suddenly, a series of bone-creaking noises could be heard from his joints. Sha Tu's eyes glowed with a faint red light. He chuckled and said, "Huan Yen and the others have done well. The more people we kill, the stronger the destructive aura of annihilation will be, and the stronger we will be. I feel like I have recovered a lot." Yang Lan laughed as well. With a casual twist of his waist, a series of cracking noises rang out, and the crystal that imprisoned him suddenly cracked with countless cracks. Sha Tu let out a long roar, and the crystal that wrapped around him suddenly exploded into countless fragments that scattered in all directions. Then these fragments simultaneously vaporized into countless streams of light that disappeared into the air like fireflies. Yang Xian narrowed his eyes and looked at the other prisoners imprisoned on the pillars. He suddenly laughed. Oh, your luck is not bad. There are actually 39 stunning beauties imprisoned here. What a waste of heavenly treasures. Beautiful women were to be raped, tortured, and killed. They were to be used to increase one's cultivation, not to be used as captives. Are the Sky King's brains filled with water? Slowly, Yang Xiao straightened his body and laughed. It's okay. I will slowly teach you what is the greatest joy of being a woman. Muffled explosions that sounded like thunder continued to ring out. The ropes binding Yang Xian split apart inch by inch. Yang Xian roared in a low voice as she slowly broke away from the pillar that was spewing out thick smoke and raging flames. Sha Tu was the same. His power was stronger than Yang Xian's, and his speed of escaping was several times faster. Monkey screamed. He opened his mouth and spat out a white sword light that slashed at Sha Tu's neck, but Sha Tu ignored his sword light. The flying sword slashed at Sha Tu's neck, cutting off half of his neck. Sha Tu's black blood spurted out, and the sword light quickly dimmed. The monkey head spat out a mouthful of blood. He had completely lost contact with the flying sword. Shit! How can you escape the god-binding pillar? Monkey screamed, but his screams came to an abrupt end. Sha Tu had punched his head into his chest. Chapter 1177. On the boundless ocean, the 6 Sky Kings were still drinking with the new sect leaders. They were really happy. They felt like everything in the world was under their control. Nothing could hide from them. Nothing could escape their calculations and schemes. The core power of the Celestial Court was in their hands. The top power of the Tao sect was in their hands. The big picture was in their hands. As for those world breakers, they had Wu Qi, a man who was willing to work hard without complaint. It had nothing to do with the celestial emperors. Sha Tu and Yang Jian were locked up in the sky prison. The 13 world breakers had lost 1/6 of their power. They just had to lock up a few more world breakers. When Daozu came out, they might be rewarded for this achievement. What the sect leaders wanted was simple. If they could get Daozu's legacy and reach Tao merge, that would be enough. What the celestial sovereigns wanted was even simpler. The position of celestial sovereign was good, but if they could get rid of their divine bodies and regain their immortal bodies, then sit on the throne of celestial sovereign, there was nothing more perfect in this world. If he could become a Tao integration stage heavenly emperor, then that kind of carefree happiness would be better than cultivating in seclusion deep in the mountains. Ever since they formed their god bodies, the 7 emotions and 6 desires returned to the 6 Sky Kings. They cared a lot about women. In the past few years, they had enjoyed a lot of beautiful women. Thinking back to the taste of ecstasy, even if they got their celestial gold bodies again, they would have to fill their training grounds with beautiful women. In the past, they had been so busy with cultivation that they did not realize it. After becoming Sky Kings, they realized there were so many good things to enjoy in the world. The 6 Sky Kings were shocked. Why had they ignored so many things in the past? Good wine, delicious food, beautiful women, and the supreme power to decide the fate of all living things. All of this made them so fascinated. Tao merged Sky King. Just thinking about it made people's hearts beat faster. Thinking about it, the Sky Kings and the sect leaders became more and more dissolute. A few of the Sky Kings started to make moves on the beautiful fairies next to them. The sect leaders knew that after they formed their god bodies, they did not have the same level of cultivation they had before. They all laughed and watched. They were brothers. So what if they were dissolute once or twice? After all, there were no outsiders here. In the secret palace, Wu Qi was sweating. With the help of Princess Zhangli, he was running the sky-stealing formation. Wisps of white mist rose into the sky above the formation, and on top of each wisp of white mist, there was a tiny lotus flower blooming. In the middle of the 6 largest lotuses, Ying Zheng and the other emperors were sitting cross-legged. Their bodies emitted majestic golden light. The so-called 6 largest lotuses were actually only 1/10 the size of a sesame seed, but the divine power ripples they emitted were extremely shocking. Near these 6 lotuses, in one of the bigger lotuses, Lu Chengfeng was meditating with his eyes closed. This lotus corresponded to the celestial Lord of Heaven, the leader of all the 1,080,000 celestial lords in the heaven. The power of the celestial Lord of Heaven and the divine power of the celestial Lord of Heaven were being drawn here by the heavenly stealing formation with a supreme divine ability, merging into Lu Chengfeng's body. Like the 6 emperors, Lu Chengfeng was getting used to the aura of this god power, trying to control and operate this brand new power. Baiqi, Lianpe, Meng Tian, Wang Jian, Li Mu, all the civil and military officials of the 6 dynasties were sent into the sky-stealing formation by Wu Qi. They had occupied the positions corresponding to many important gods in the celestial court, and were getting used to the aura of the divine power in these positions with Wu Qi's help. For example, Baiqi was pushed to the position of Heavenly Killer Celestial Lord by Wu Qi. Baiqi's cultivation technique and temperament were very compatible with the power of this position. At the moment, a pile of human skulls was looming behind Baiqi, and an astonishing killing intent was fluctuating around him. Apart from these emperors and ministers of the 6 dynasties who occupied the important positions, the other middle and small divine positions in the celestial court were also occupied by the elites of the 6 dynasties. Tens of millions of soldiers of the 6 dynasties, together with a part of the elite troops under the command of the Yellow Emperor Shenyuan and the Yen Emperor Shennong, were all sent into the sky-stealing formation by Wu Qi. The huge formation had begun to operate, and the divine power of the Great Path was constantly flowing into the formation. As long as the formation was operated well, with Wu Qi's order, everyone could forcibly take the control of the entire celestial court from the hands of the 6 emperors and the other divine gods. The position of the celestial court was the highest and most powerful divine position in the 3 worlds. With this position, Wu Qi could influence the operation of the Great Path of the entire Pangu world. The 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs had worked hard for the God-conferring plan for countless years, and finally succeeded. However, Wu Qi took most of the benefits from their hands without saying a word. If the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs, who were in closed-door cultivation, knew about this, they would definitely faint from anger. If Wu Qi didn't have the mysterious thieving energy inside his body, Wu Qi wouldn't have been able to do such a heaven-defying thing. But the thievery energy had an unfathomable mystery. As long as it existed in the world, there was nothing it could not touch. Even the heavenly Tao godhood and the divine power of the heavenly Tao, which were illusory, could be forcibly used by Wu Qi. The magic power needed to operate the entire sky-stealing formation was too great. Wu Qi couldn't do it alone, so Princess Zhongli also joined in. Princess Zhongli's 5 elements true spirits could communicate with the heaven and earth. In terms of magic power recovery speed, even Wu Qi couldn't compare. Princess Zhongli helped Wu Qi absorb the Holy Spirit energy and turn it into holy power to operate the formation. The couple worked together to barely maintain the good operation of the formation. When all the deities had returned and all the important formation eyes of the formation were filled, Wu Qi finally breathed a sigh of relief. He wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and took a few steps back. Although the positions of those low-level deity positions, such as those of the immeasurable number of heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals, had not been filled up yet, those low-level heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals had little effect on the formation. The current sky-stealing formation had at least 90% of the power of the entire heavenly deity position. Once they familiarize themselves with their divine power, when the time comes, many of them will have a very good look on their faces. With his hands clasped behind his back and looking at the sky-stealing formation, Wu Qi laughed happily. He said slowly, "First, we'll seize the position of the celestial court, then slowly design the positions of the human world and the netherworld. When all the positions of the 3 realms are in our hands, then..." After pondering for a while, Wu Qi pulled Princess Zhongli into his arms. The 2 were silent for a while. Everything he did was to ensure that his family and friends could live in peace and contentment. Wu Qi told himself in his heart that if it was possible, when everything was settled, he would go to Earth and establish a Taoist right hall. He would stay there for a long time. There were some things there that he couldn't forget, things that he couldn't forget. Especially for Wu Qi, who was a loner in his previous life, those things were the most precious to him. Princess Zhang put her arms around Wu Qi's waist and rubbed her little face against Wu Qi's chest. Just as the two were about to say something sweet and tender, the three pure ones suddenly shook violently. A loud noise came from the west, and a monstrous murderous aura rushed out from somewhere in the west and quickly spread across the entire celestial court. Wu Qi was startled. He hastily inscribed a few runes on the sky-stealing formation and sent a voice transmission to Yen Dan and the others, telling them to focus on practicing the formation and ignore what was happening outside. After that, he grabbed Princess Zhang Li's hand and flew straight out of the secret palace. Yi Xia had flown high up into the sky with Ao Buzan and the others, using a divine ability to look toward the west. In the far distance to the west, the void was twisting and cracking. Then, with a loud noise, that part of the void exploded into pieces, and a mountain range more than 30,000 miles long and 100 miles high appeared out of thin air. That was where the prison of the Celestial Court was located. This nameless mountain range had been completely concealed by some almighty experts with restrictive spells, and now, someone was violently attacking the various restrictive spells in the mountain range. The outer layer of the mountain range was the weakest, and was the first to be violently destroyed. The whole mountain range was spraying out threatening grand white energy essence, which turned into countless sharp swords and shot in all directions. Some immortals who were closer to the mountain range were rushing there, but the tsunami-like explosion of grand white energy essence had knocked them into a sorry state. At least thousands of weaker heaven immortals were stabbed by the swords, howling and falling from the sky. With hands clasped behind his back, Reverend Shou Zhuo flew up into the sky unhurriedly. He gave the place a glance and said with a smile, "That's the direction of the prison of the Celestial Court. It looks like an important prisoner has escaped from the prison. But judging from the commotion, the prisoner should still be in the prison. I wonder if the guards there can suppress him or not." Wu Qi sent his divine sense in that direction, which seeped into the whole mountain range like water. Instantly, all the commotion and images in the prison were displayed before his eyes. Wu Qi sneered and said, "It's Sha Tu and Yang Xian who have escaped. What did those 6 good-for-nothings say when they wanted to leave? The prison is impregnable, and nothing can happen to them. Now, they have escaped and are slaughtering the prisoners in the prison to absorb their blood essence." The prison was a scene of bloodshed. How could the prisoners suppressed by the prison's restrictive spells escape from Sha Tu and Yang Xian? From the 360th floor to the 341st floor, there were only a little over 300 prisoners, but all of them had Tao-breaking cultivation bases. Judging from the appearance of some of them, they were clearly chaos fiend gods. It was unknown how long they had been imprisoned, but now, they had become Sha Tu and Yang Xian's food. The two of them had killed all the prison guards on the bottom 10 floors, destroyed all the restrictive spells, and devoured all the prisoners. Now, they were on their way to the prison on the top floor. If they could really devour all the prisoners in the prison, Wu Qi calculated that their magic power would be equal to that of the 7 Buddhist patriarchs and the 9 Tao patriarchs, or even slightly stronger. After all, there were too many prisoners in the prison, and there were many top experts among them. Since the establishment of the Celestial Court, the number of prisoners in the prison had been increasing. The Celestial Court had gone through more than 1,000 celestial emperors, and each celestial emperor had been in power for at least 100 eons, or at least 15 or 16 eons. Even if there were only 3 to 5 new prisoners every year, the number of prisoners in the prison was still an astronomical figure. TSK, this is going to be interesting. If they can really devour all the prisoners, they will be immortal, and they will have magic power equal to that of Daozu Buddha. Haha, this is going to be a fun battle. Wu Qi suddenly laughed gloatingly. "Gods of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth," he cried out, "heed my order, gods of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Assemble your divine weapons and protect the palace of translucence and the surrounding halls. We must not let these evildoers break into the heart of the Celestial Court." The order from Wu Qi threw the entire celestial court into chaos. Since the gods of 5 elements had gone to protect the palace of translucence, who was going to suppress the prisoners in the prison? The gods of thunder, cloud, and the other gods of thunder hurriedly led their subordinates to the west, while the celestial lords scrambled to their feet and turned into beams of light as they sped toward the west. The celestial court was in complete chaos. It was a major event that a fugitive had appeared in the prison. Chapter 1178. This time, we'll just watch the show. Wu Qi folded his arms over his chest and grinned gloatingly as he watched those gods who were rushing toward the heavenly prison in the form of beams of light or on clouds. The 6 celestial emperors had personally taken Yang Xian and Sha Tu away from him and then personally escorted them to the prison. Now that Yang Xian and Sha Tu had been freed, the celestial emperors were humiliated, and Wu Qi had no intention of attacking them for their sake. The gods of the 5 elements, metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, formed the connate 5 elements formation in the sky. They looked anxiously in the direction of the prison, anxiously wanting to lead their divine soldiers and generals to reinforce them. But now that they had been assigned by the celestial emperors to serve Wu Qi, they did not dare to act rashly without Wu Qi's permission. A stream of light shot out of Wu Qi's eyes. Accompanied by a deep roar of waves, the stream of light turned into a huge light curtain with a radius of several miles in front of everyone. Everything in the prison could be seen clearly through the light curtain. The people around Wu Qi were fine, for they were used to Wu Qi's divine powers and means. But the 5 gods were all dumbfounded. They knew that the prison was densely covered with restrictions, and there was even a large formation set up by Daozu himself to seal off the surroundings. The fact that Wu Qi could see everything in the prison from hundreds of millions of miles away proved that all the restrictions had been penetrated by his divine sense. Other restrictions and formations aside, there was the Yin and Yang Tai Ching divine mausoleum formation set up by Zi Mei Daozu himself. When he set it up, Zi Mei Daozu was already a Dao fusing expert. Since Wu Qi could penetrate the prison with his divine sense through this formation, didn't it mean that his divine sense was at least comparable to Zi Mei Daozu's, or even better than Zi Daozu's? After figuring out the mystery, the 5 gods shut their mouths at the same time. None of them dared to speak again. Although they were core disciples of the Dao sect before they were conferred as gods, and although they were loyal and devoted to the 6 celestial emperors, it was precisely because they were core elite disciples of the Dao sect that they understood how terrifying Dao ancestors were. Such a figure was not someone they could provoke. Even if they had been conferred the heavenly Dao, couldn't a Dao fusing expert completely kill them? They did not dare to take this risk. Conscientiously, the 5 divine gods commanded the hundreds of millions of divine soldiers to form the 5 elements formation, guarding the palace with a circumference of 1,000,000 miles with great vigilance. From the moment Wu Qi fell into this divine power, Wu Qi's position in their hearts had surpassed that of the 6 celestial emperors. Strength determined everything. Since Wu Qi had reached the level of Daozu, he was much more important than the celestial emperors. All the gods and divine emperors had rushed to the outside of the prison. Soon, a great heavenly formation was set up outside the prison. Except for the 5 elements and the 5 divisions, the other gods stood in their respective positions and blocked the outside of the prison with the millions of celestial lords. The great heavenly formation was the first battle formation set up by the celestial court with all the troops. It gathered the power of millions of celestial lords and billions of gods. Together with the almost endless army of the celestial court, this formation was spherical and had a diameter of more than 1,000,000,000,000 miles. In the original idea, this formation was used by the celestial court to deal with Buddhism in the future. They did not expect this formation to be used in a short time. But today, 2 world breakers had escaped from the prison. The celestial court immediately set up the formation. Within a short span of 100 years, none of the divine beings in the heaven had mastered the great sky formation. Although those powerful celestial lords and divine emperors were able to communicate with each other through their powerful divine wills and stand in their respective positions, their celestial soldiers and divine generals were still running around in a mess. The main structure of the enormous formation had barely taken shape, but the details of the inner parts were far from complete. A formation like this had form but no spirit. It could scare people, but if it was used in a fight, it would be useless. Now, they were in a hurry to set up the big formation. They did not have the time to bring the flags and formation weapons. The power of the big formation was reduced by more than 90%. In the sky, 6 clouds of purple gas and 18 clouds suddenly flashed. The 6 sky kings shouted at the same time, and the messy great heavenly formation suddenly stopped. Celestial Emperor Yuan Yen roared furiously. First, he gave a torrent of abuse to the 30,000 celestial sovereigns in charge of guarding the dungeon. Then he personally ordered the celestial sovereigns, Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise, to rush into the dungeon as reinforcements. The 4 element gods were also an important force of the celestial court. They were responsible for guarding the 33 skies. They were the top figures in the celestial court. The 4 divine lords had the power of Tao breaking before they were conferred as gods. Under their command were the 4 great marshals corresponding to the 4 seasons, the 12 generals corresponding to the 12 moons, the 24 spirit officers corresponding to the 24 solar terms, and the divine generals on duty for the 365 days. Yuan Yen Sky King gave the order, and the 4 element gods immediately rushed into the prison with their generals. The millions of soldiers under them formed the 4 holy evil suppression spirit formation and slowly descended from the sky, blocking the entrance of the prison. All 1,080,000 celestial lords roared at the same time. All the stars in the sky burst out with a dazzling silver light that no one could look straight at. Powerful star forces fell from the sky like tidewater and poured into the bodies of these 4 divine weapons. Before they became gods, the 4 element gods were at least peak heaven immortals. After they became gods and condensed the divine body of heavenly Tao, their strength had a corresponding breakthrough. Basically, they all had the strength of gold immortals. Now, with the help of the star power of the 1,080,000 celestial lords, their bodies grew taller rapidly. Each of them swelled to about 100 feet. Their skin showed a colorful golden color, and their pores constantly ejected the bright silver light unique to the star power. Everyone's strength was instantly raised to the level of peak gold immortals. Nearly 10 million peak gold immortals formed the 4 holy evil suppression spirit formation. This formation was enough to trap Daozu and Buddha, who had just stepped into the Tao-fusing realm, in a short period of time. Wu Qi could not help but suck in a deep breath when he saw the divine weapon under 4 phases Divine Lord's command was so mighty. He looked back at Princess Zhonglu and said with a smile, "When you fight them in the future, don't wait for them to finish setting up the formation. Setting up a formation with the power of the heavenly Tao and using the power of the stars to enhance your magic power and divine abilities is simply cheating. If you are trapped in this formation, you will be able to protect yourself, but you will not be able to break the formation. It will be very annoying." Princess Zhonglu raised her eyebrows. Before she could say anything, Yixia had already laughed sinisterly. She said in a strange voice, "Who will be trapped in their formation? Can't we just kill them all before they finish setting up the formation?" Wu Qi shook his head, feeling a headache coming on. "We can't kill them all. With the deification pool, even if they die, they will quickly reform their divine bodies. Unless we kill tens of millions of people at the same time, they will definitely finish setting up the formation. This is giving me a headache." In the other room, the 6 celestial emperors personally gave orders to adjust the Great Chaos Heaven formation. Under their orders, the divine soldiers began to operate in an orderly manner, which was much better than the chaotic situation just now. The 6 celestial emperors were very familiar with the formation diagram of the Great Chaos Heaven formation, and each of their orders was extremely exquisite. Under their command, the Great Chaos Heaven formation gradually began to take shape. A mighty and irresistible aura came rushing over. Even with Wu Qi's cultivation base, he could not help but take 3 steps back. Princess Zhonglu and the others were even more embarrassed, and they were almost blown away by the aura. When he looked in the direction of the celestial prison, he could no longer see what was happening there with the naked eye. All he could see was a plume of purple smoke rising into the sky. The purple smoke rushed into the sky, and it even caused the celestial absolute heaven to tremble a little. Wu Qi's expression changed once again. The great chaos heaven formation, if this formation was really formed and operated, it would probably be able to suppress even figures at the level of Buddha. Judging by the momentum, it would not be a problem to suppress two Buddha ancestors at the same time. If there was a conflict between Buddhism and Tao sects, the 9 Tao ancestors would gang up on the remaining 5 Buddha ancestors and have a great chance of suppressing all 5 Buddha ancestors. If Buddhism did not prepare any countermeasures, it was likely that they would suffer a great loss in the future. Just as Wu Qi was frantically thinking about all kinds of possibilities, 4-element Immortal had already rushed into the heavenly prison with his divine generals and quickly rushed along the spacious corridor to the level where Yang Xian and Sha Tu were. There was a tyrannical restriction in the heavenly prison. Even though 4-element Immortal was powerful, he could not fly through the air. They could only run forward like mortals. However, their running speed was extremely fast, which was basically comparable to the speed of a golden immortal flying on a flying sword. The area of the heavenly prison was extremely large, and the corridors inside were extremely complicated. Even though 4-element Immortal flew down at his fastest speed, it still took him half an hour to meet Yang Xian, who had just come out of a cell. In that cell was a female immortal who had committed a crime, and her cultivation base was at the peak of golden immortal. No one knew why she had committed the crime. She had been imprisoned in the heavenly prison for at least many years, during which she had experienced at least 10 celestial emperors. As a golden immortal, this female immortal did not look old. She was still youthful and beautiful, but it was her youthful beauty and her cultivation base at the peak of golden immortal that brought her a disaster, an extremely miserable disaster. Yang Xian walked out of the cell while humming a tune. At the door of the cell was the corpse of the female immortal, shriveled like a reed stick, and near her lower body was a large pool of black blood. Yang Xian's aura had increased a bit, and he looked particularly comfortable with a ruddy face. Divine Lord Vermilion Bird was the only woman among the 4-element immortals. When she saw the miserable scene in the cell, she could not help but fly into a rage. With a wave of her hands, a pair of red wings wrapped in a blue flame whizzed up behind her. The divine artifact of Divine Lord Vermilion Bird condensed from the divine power of the Great Path, the Vermilion Bird dazzling halo, transformed into a dazzling purple sun that floated above her head, constantly spurting out countless extremely thin threads of light that pierced Yang Xian's body. When Yang Xian saw the beautiful Divine Lord Vermilion Bird, he could not help but drool. He laughed wildly and said, "You divine lords are really strange. I can't even absorb a trace of spiritual essence from your body. But for the sake of your face and figure, even if you don't have any spiritual essence, I'll have some fun with you today." A pink demonic energy rushed out of the top of Yang Xian's head, turning into a pair of snow-white arms that grabbed at Divine Lord Vermilion Bird's head. Yang Xian laughed wildly and said, "Beauty, why are you fighting to the death? Come and have some fun with me." A strong light flashed, and the cells around them suddenly trembled. The Vermilion Bird dazzling halo collided with the arms, and the Vermilion Bird divine flame turned the arms into smoke. Yang Xian's expression changed slightly. Just as he was about to tease Divine Lord Vermilion Bird, Divine Lord Azure Dragon had already rushed out. A dragon roar soared into the sky as Divine Lord Azure Dragon transformed into a raging cyan dragon and headbutted Yang Xian's chest. Yang Xian opened his mouth and spat out a breath that reeked of blood. He held Divine Lord Azure Dragon's head tightly with both hands and twisted it hard. Crack! Divine Lord Azure Dragon's neck was broken. Chapter 1179. Wu Qi was rendered speechless, while the people around him shook their heads. The celestial court's chaos heaven formation burst into exclamations, followed by complete silence. As the head of the 4-element divine lords in the celestial court, Divine Lord Azure Dragon's divine abilities were unpredictable, and his divine body was shockingly strong. He was no weaker than a body cultivator of the same realm. In particular, there was a strand of innate first with spiritual energy in his body, which made his divine body's vitality endless. If he really fought, he would have a very strong endurance and resilience. In the Celestial Court, apart from a few of the 1,080,000 Celestial Lords, no one could compare to Divine Lord Azure Dragon when it came to physical strength. However, such a strong Azure Dragon divine body had his neck forcibly broken by Yang Xian. What was even more shocking was that Divine Lord Azure Dragon's life force was cut off the moment his neck was broken. His divine body suddenly collapsed, and a Yuan Ling flew into the sky, sucked toward the deification pool. "How dare you, evildoer!" Divine Lord Black Tortoise flew into a rage. He suddenly charged forward, a huge black tortoise shell faintly visible behind him. Like a huge rock, he smashed toward Yang Xian. Azure Dragon's divine abilities were ever-changing, and his life force was extremely strong. On the other hand, Divine Lord Black Tortoise's physical defense was the best in the Celestial Court, and his strength was even more astonishing. Although Divine Lord Azure Dragon's physical body was strong, his physical body was mostly manifested in his abnormal recovery ability. In terms of physical strength, Divine Lord Black Tortoise's brute force was enough to multiply the combined physical strength of Azure Dragon, White Tiger, and Vermilion Bird Divine Lords by several times. Even Yang Xian's expression changed when such a divine power collided head-on. He let out a deep roar, and a pink rune flashed between his eyebrows. Suddenly, the shadow of a huge mountain flashed behind him, and he also brutally stretched out his arms and smashed toward Divine Lord Black Tortoise. While pouncing toward Divine Lord Black Tortoise, he still had the leisure to tease Divine Lord Vermilion Bird. "Beauty, after I kill this boar, I'll definitely strip you naked and see how long and white your legs are." There was another loud explosion as Yang Gui and Divine Lord Black Tortoise collided. The illusory mountain behind Yang Ling shattered with a loud bang, and blood spurted out of Yang Ling's 7 orifices at the same time. The Black Tortoise Divine Lord's brute force was too strong. The clothes in front of Yang Xian's chest were torn to shreds by his brute force. The Black Tortoise Divine Lord wrapped his arms around Yang Xian's waist and pushed her forward like a mad bull. Yang Xian lost his footing and howled angrily as he was pushed more than 100 miles away by Black Tortoise Divine Lord. He was forcefully pushed from the middle of the tunnel to the end. At the end of the over 300-mile-long path was a wall coiled in purple thunderbolts. Black Tortoise Emperor foamed at the mouth and breathed out 2 scorching streams of white smoke from his nostrils. Valiantly and violently, he bumped Yang Xian against the wall. The surrounding cells suddenly shook, and countless prisoners cried out at the same time. Yang Gui's arms suddenly spread out and stuck to the wall like a piece of paper. Black Tortoise Divine Lord slammed Yang Xian into the wall, giving off the impression that Yang Xian had turned into a thin piece of paper. It was pressed against the wall as though all the flesh and blood in its body had been squeezed out. The Thunderbolt enchantment on the wall was activated. Countless water tank-sized thunderbolts rushed out of the surrounding air with deafening rumbles and struck Yang Xian's body. Black smoke rose from Yang Xian's body as he kept coughing out mouthfuls of blood. His aura was weakening rapidly, and with every mouthful of blood he coughed out, the magic power he lost was equal to the power of a peak gold immortal. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of thunderbolts struck Yang Xian. Yang Xian howled furiously, struggled to raise both hands and exert his divine power, smashing them down on Black Tortoise Divine Lord's back. Every strike was like a thunderbolt, like a meteor crashing into the ground, and could shatter a part of the starry sky. Divine Lord Black Tortoise's body trembled violently. The black and yellow tortoiseshell on his back was overflowing with flowing light. Cracks kept appearing on the thick tortoiseshell. However, no matter how Yang Xian attacked, the cracks healed immediately. The defense of the tortoiseshell was extremely strong. A tiger's roar rose into the sky as a huge pair of white wings spread out behind White Tiger Divine Lord's back. He swung his sword and thrust it forward like a white bolt of lightning. Black Tortoise dodge. White Tiger Divine Lord threw his head back and roared. Black Tortoise lowered his head and lay prone on the ground. The sword beam narrowly brushed past Black Tortoise's scalp and stabbed into Yang Xian's heart. White Tiger opened his mouth and sprayed a stream of blood essence, which was coiled in a white mist, onto the sword in his hand. The spirit divine weapon, which was also condensed from the divine power of the great Tao, began trembling abruptly. It looked like a hedgehog that had suddenly revealed all its thorns. Beams of white light shone out of the sword, and a series of puffing noises could be heard as the great white gunmetal sword energy shredded Yang Ming's internal organs. Yang Xian's eyes, nose, and mouth turned from a small stream of blood to a fountain. Blood gushed out of his eyes, nose, mouth, and mouth. It sprayed dozens of feet away. White Tiger Divine Lord, who was standing in front of him, was covered in blood. White Tiger Divine Lord laughed at Yang Xian and shouted, "You want to bully the Red Sparrow? Do you think you can do that? Hee hee, I don't care if you are a world breaker. Go die." He waved his sword wildly and slashed Yang Xian 3,600 times in the blink of an eye. Yang Xian's body, which was not very tall and strong, was smashed to pieces. Countless pieces of flesh and blood sprayed all over the ground. White Tiger Divine Lord raised his sword triumphantly and roared into the sky. "Red Sparrow, use your divine flame of the vermilion bird to burn this bastard's flesh and blood." Before White Tiger could say anything, the vermilion bird Divine Lord had already thrown his head back and roared into the sky. Rolling blue flames swept out like a tidal wave toward Yang Xian's flesh and blood. Just as the vermilion bird divine flame was about to burn the flesh and blood, a venomous curse rose into the sky. The flesh and blood wriggled, and countless blood vessels and tendrils of flesh shot out from the remains. These blood vessels and tendrils of flesh intertwined with each other. Gusts of chilly wind rose from the ground, and Yang Xian returned to his original form in the blink of an eye. However, compared to the monstrous aura he had when he charged out of the lowest level of the heavenly prison, Yang Xian's aura now was at most equivalent to that of a mid-stage Tao-breaking cultivator. He no longer had the aura he had when he fought against a Tao-fusing cultivator. Seeing that the flames were already in front of him, Yang Xian roared and his body strangely started to keratinize. Like an insect, his skin became glossy and hard, becoming a material like a longhorn beetle's shell. His hands became two sharp thorns, and his joints were like rubber that could stretch infinitely. Yang Xian's body spun rapidly, and his arms suddenly became dozens of feet long. His flexible arms drove the sharp thorns that his palms had turned into. In the blink of an eye, he stabbed at least 100,000 times. White Tiger Divine Lord let out a miserable howl. His physical defense was far weaker than the Black Tortoise's, and his body was riddled with hundreds of see-through holes. There was even a bowl-sized see-through hole between his eyebrows. White Tiger Divine Lord's divine body collapsed, and a strand of Yuan Ling was sucked away by the deification pool. Then, Black Tortoise Divine Lord howled in pain. At least half of Yang Xian's attacks landed on him, and all of them were aimed at the core of Black Tortoise's tortoiseshell. Hundreds of thousands of stabs landed on that point at almost the same time, and Black Tortoise Divine Lord's sturdy defense was finally shattered by this terrifying attack. Yang Xian's right spike and Black Tortoise Divine Lord's tortoiseshell turned into streams of light and dissipated at the same time. However, the spike in his left hand stabbed into Black Tortoise Divine Lord's back thousands of times. Black Tortoise Divine Lord howled in pain, and his divine body collapsed. Yuan Ling shot into the sky and fled. The vermilion bird Divine Flame had already reached Yang Xian's body, and his shell crackled from the heat. Some of the more fragile parts of the shell were even melted, and they turned into a crimson paste that dripped onto the ground. Laughing wildly, Yang Xian charged forward at lightning speed, charging at Divine Lord Vermilion Bird without any fear of death. Divine Lord Vermilion Bird's expression flickered. She flapped her wings, and the ring brought up a blinding light as it smashed heavily onto Yang Xian's chest. A white flame burst out from the ring, burning a 1-foot-wide part of Yang Xian's chest to ashes. White flames sprayed out from his 7 orifices and every pore on his body. He waved the remaining spike in his left hand in a sorry state and quickly unleashed tens of thousands of attacks at Divine Lord Vermilion Bird. Divine Lord Vermilion Bird was the fastest among the Divine Lords of 4 Element. She left countless afterimages in the air as she dodged Yang Xian's attacks with great difficulty. However, the generals of the 4 Element Immortals behind her were not so lucky. At least 200 immortal generals were knocked into the air, and their bodies were riddled with countless holes. In just the blink of an eye, their divine bodies were shattered, and their original souls soared into the sky and fled toward the deification pool. Divine Lord Vermilion Bird was furious. She shouted, "Form the 4-element formation and trap this monster here." The important god spirits of the celestial court knew that world breakers could not be killed. If they were killed, it would not take long for them to reappear. Instead of waiting for them to reappear again and again, it was better to trap them and kill them. Then, they would find a way to weaken their power and suppress them with restrictions. That was the only way to solve the problem once and for all. The Divine Lords of 4 Element rushed into the prison at the same time. At the moment, only Divine Lord Vermilion Bird was in good shape. This made the short-tempered Divine Lord Vermilion Bird extremely angry. In particular, Yang Ye's filthy words made her hate Yang Ye to the extreme. She turned into a fire dragon that spun around Yang Xian. From time to time, she would spew out countless white flames that melted Yang Xian's shell. The remaining generals of the 4 Element Immortals formed a large formation and besieged Yang Jian on the spot. Outside the prison, the 6 great Sky Kings looked at each other and smiled. It looked like Yang Xian could not escape. At this critical moment, an earth-shattering roar suddenly came from one of the cells next to them. A huge sound wave came out. Dozens of god generals with the lowest level of cultivation had their god bodies shattered. Divine Lord Vermilion Bird felt dizzy and he subconsciously slowed down to look in the direction of the prison cell. Divine Lord Vermilion Bird, who was wearing heavy armor and holding a giant sword, roared and slashed down. Divine Lord Vermilion Bird, who was in a daze, could not dodge. The sword went from his head to his crotch. Chi-Chi was cut in half. Yang Xian was furious. He shouted, "Kill him! Give me back my beauty!" Sha Tu rushed into the 4-element formation and waved his sword. He angrily shouted, "Give me back my ass! Hurry up and get out of here! We are all going to be trapped here! Bastard! Killing them did not bring us any benefits. Our power did not increase, but it weakened us." Yang Xian's face changed. He screamed into the sky. He worked with Sha Tu to go to the end of the tunnel. The god generals, who were in a mess because of Sha Tu, could not stop the mad attacks of the 2 world breakers. In a few seconds, they were forced out. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.